check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
This is the pod, and this is the cast. Listen full and descend.
You want to go even lower?
Lower in the pitch?
Pod. Yeah, you know. The horse, the podcast is the white of the pod is the white of the cast.
I gotta find my Jackson Maine. I gotta do my Jackson Maine.
I just want to get another look.
Listen,
This is the pod, and
that
this
Gene
is the
song
cast.
sucks.
Why
Why are you singing about jeans
Just want to get another
when you should be
look at
singing
you.
about swimming pool shallowness, etc.?
Friendo.
Is it more Anton Chigurh?
Friendo.
Does he have a deep? I guess he has a deep voice. He has such a quiet voice, right, Sugar? Where it's like you're leaning in.
You've ever lost an acquaintance, friendo.
I'm sorry, Kelly MacDonald. You have to die now.
We love
Probably.
the Coen brothers.
It's ambiguous.
The one sort of impediment to the idea of us ever doing it is that it's a long series, right?
Long series, and a lot of well discussed films that we basically like.
But movies, yeah, I was gonna say movies we overall basically love. Can you imagine how much fun we'd have doing fucking Anton Chigurh bits?
I think we'd have a lot of fun doing Tommy Lee Jones as well. Like
God, the bit!
Like No Country would be a heavy bit.
It's not like that's the only one.
No, I think
But-
most of them have that kind of thing.
Jesus, the amount of runway we get off of just Anton Chigurh having other types of conversations.
I mean, the Coens are like Lynch, not.
I want a Baconator Jr.
Yeah, then I got
Make it
a
combo meal.
Bacon King over here.
No, I want the Junior King.
Can't finish it. It's too big. It's too big.
You're not going to finish.
Oh, yeah. David's not doing a bit. David does, in fact, have a Bacon King here.
Fucking huge.
Sounds like you're more of a Bacon Prince.
Yeah,
You got a little
jeez.
too big for your britches.
I didn't mean to.
Hey, by the way, this is an episode about one of the most revered works of art we probably ever covered in the history of the show, right?
At least of recent time, right? Like a sort of a totemic moment in recent American art. or
And certainly
American pop
like
culture,
an
whatever.
absolutely unique one of one object.
I think so.
Yeah, much like your unfinished Bacon King.
Maybe I'll finish it.
These are huge stakes to set up for this episode.
We'll see.
Humongous.
We'll see what I do.
This is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, ostensibly.
Sure.
Directors who experience. God, I'm somehow now forgetting.
Massive success early on.
early on in the careers. Thank you.
Jeez. You okay?
Great day. I don't know what's going on. I was like, what is the word I used to describe the success?
Massive.
Massive success early on in the careers. Don't worry, I've only been doing this for 10 years. Given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce, baby. Sometimes those checks continue on to television. And then this is like a blank check within a blank check. Is that a fair categorization?
100%. 100%. Yep. This is a somewhat a standalone blank check within a large blank check project.
Which is like, yes, there's like 7 inception layers to how you get to this existing.
Yeah, 2 or 3, but yeah, sure.
I'm going
What
to say
about
7. I'm going to say 7.
We are here today. We're in the middle of discussing Twin Peaks: The Return.
David Lynch, Twin Pods Firecast with me has been our series. We have now gotten to his most recent work to date, Twin Peaks: The Return,
Season 3 of Twin Peaks.
which we have split into 4 episodes. And at David's insistence, episode 2 is only about 1 episode in our podcast.
Yes, our part 8, also known as Gotta Light, the iconic 8th episode of Twin Peaks: The Return. We're here to discuss it today, and that's what we're doing.
Now, can I say our guest is being too respectful?
Way too. Well, he might be also be, I don't know, doing his taxes
Is
on
he
his phone
queuing
right
something
now.
up or is he doing the taxes?
I'm doing a little research, but I'm also very much being respectful.
But you know what? Loosen that tie. Get messy. Stop showing us so much respect.
Friendo.
It's a totemic work that we're about to discuss.
Here's a rare thing that we don't do often. a kind of in-series double dip.
Yeah. I don't know. We just wanted to.
We wanted to. We had a guest for this episode possibly, and then life circumstances came up, and it was suddenly like we need to get this done. And it was just like, who's the right person to tackle something this big, but also is perhaps around?
Yeah.
And who we just had a lovely time talking Twin Peaks with.
And it was like, you know what would be nice to just do even more of that.
And it's also as people who have been behind the paywall, people who have ventured into the Patreon to experience the Twin Peaks season 2 episode. They've already heard me talk Twin Peaks, but what they will also know from that episode is that when David Lynch won, you came to me and said, Connor, what do you want to take your pick?
Anything.
I
give you first round draft pick of the entire career.
I say Twin Peaks season 2 without hesitation. You say, well, that's actually going to be off the main feed. I say, I don't care. I don't care. I did have a twinge of regret thinking that because this was my second.
This was
was the other one.
Oh, well, that's good to know then.
Well, look at that.
This was the one where I almost like, if I had bailed on that idea, wanting to get into the main feed, it would be to talk about this, because when I think of season 2, the main thing I think of is how the season 2 finale remains probably the weirdest thing to ever air for any reason in prime time, and the weirdest scripted thing to intentionally air on network television.
I had been primed and hyped to understand that was the case before watching it last night. You know, there's been a lot of buildup for me.
I mean, I'm talking about the season 2 finale.
Oh,
that was the weirdest thing ever on network.
Up until
TV.
that point.
Up until that. And still probably for network TV. I don't know that there's that much competition for Monday night on ABC for something where it's almost all in the Black Lodge. Weird strobe lights, etc.
The episode of 2.5 Men where Charlie Sheen dies is up there.
There are things like that are odd because of what's happening outside of the episode.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And episode 8
he
of
got
The
exploded
Return.
by a train?
Yes. And at some point, Kathy Bates plays his ghost. I can't remember if it's in that episode or a different episode, but that reaches sort of like Black Lodge levels of like, yeah.
But episode 8 of The Return is sort of David Lynch then going like, well, I already have this one sort of unprecedented thing that's kind of almost never been topped.
Right.
What is the premium cable equivalent of that?
But I'd argue the first 7 episodes feel like, holy shit, he's going weirder than he's gone before.
Right. What's going on here?
And then he's like, no, I need to make the thing that is weird in relation to the template of weirdness I've already set, much like the season 2 finale, you're saying.
And I'll tell you something that this is what I was looking to try to get information on within the archives of my social media. I believe that in June-ish of 2017. That was when this aired, right? 2017?
This episode aired on exactly June 25th, 2017.
I think like at some point, and I can't find the date, Dana Ashbrook did monologues at UCB.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
my favorite.
While The Return was airing, but before episode 8 had aired. And I brought in one of my Twin Peaks trading cards, my Bobby Briggs, to get it signed.
Was it a rookie card?
It's a Bobby Briggs rookie card.
Yeah, first season.
And this is after Bobby killed a guy, but before he became a cop. And I remember him in like one of the little like the beer storage room that was off of and where people like kept their coats and bags and stuff. I remember him signing this and saying, I was like, man, it's great. I'm loving watching this. And he's like, yeah, I hear the 8th episode is pretty crazy.
So he hadn't even seen it.
But he was at least vaguely aware, like maybe they've been informed, like that's the doozy or that.
And he's obviously not in it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, what a strange thing to say. How could the 8th episode, like, I remember thinking, like, what is he talking about?
Well, and like, yes.
Because I couldn't, at that point, I was like, I think I know by this point, we're however many episodes in, I think I know what Twin Peaks The Return is.
He's not doing the obvious 3rd season. He's breaking his own template. What could weird me out at this point?
So I was like, what's going to happen that's so weird? And then episode 8, I believe, aired over the weekend of the Del Close Marathon.
Oh, wild. Okay. So you were probably also sleep deprived?
Yeah, which is like this 3-day marathon of not like where I probably did like more than 20 shows in 3 days.
We should say our guest today is Connor Ratliff.
Hi there.
Sorry. Yeah, of course.
I'm glad you apologized, David. It was really rude what you were doing.
It's so rude of me to not introduce our guest.
Yeah.
Well, here I am.
But for those who don't know, the Del Close Marathon was a thing that UCB used to do that was like 72 straight hours of shows basically happening all day, all night, all morning.
All sorts of venues all over the city.
Across several venues, right? Mostly around Chelsea, but especially at the old UCB theater, not the original, but the Chelsea one. You would have these shows that happen at like 5:30 in the morning that were 15 minutes long, that were chaos. And someone like you, who is, I have often maintained, perhaps the greatest improviser in the world. I certainly think at that point you were sort of the greatest improviser in New York City, at the very least. You're getting asked to jump in on most of these things. But then Twin Peaks is like this seismic important thing for you. You probably could not wait to watch the episode. You weren't going to be like, let me get a good night's sleep before I try episode 8.
No, and also because I'd learned from previous years that one of my indulgences is that I would get a hotel room in Manhattan, sort of near the venues, so that I'd have a place to go crash at weird times of the day and not have to take a train all the way back to Queens.
Sure. If I know anything about you as well, there's nothing in the world you hate more than any form of commute. I would say that's your kryptonite.
Yeah.
And yet you live in Queens. You should live at like whatever. Yeah, like 34th and Madison or so. You should just be like, I'm right dead center, baby.
Yeah, I need to do substantially better.
I know it's not like you can't just like pick a place around there. Or whatever. I don't know. You should just make that your entire priority.
But I also think it is part of your core essence that if you somehow were able to book a show 2 blocks from where you live, let's even say 1 block away from your apartment.
Yeah.
Your response would be, but that's the worst block. You don't know how tough it is to walk that block.
What subway are you on? Not to reveal your location.
I don't want to dox myself.
Okay, all right.
That's smart.
Do you have more than one subway I guess is my question.
Oh, I'm near a hub. You'll
Okay,
never guess
okay.
where I am.
David's like waking up at this line of questioning. Have
I
you
love
noticed
to-
the influx of energy of David suddenly being able to talk train lines?
People are always like, looking for places in New York City, right? I have, there's always someone
This
who's
is
looking.
true. I say this. People are always looking for places
And I'm always
in New
like,
York
oh,
City.
let me help. And I do like looking at like real estate listings, but what I really like doing is thinking
commute.
about, the web of transit you will access from wherever you're looking.
Can I ask for some key bleeps on what I'm about to say?
Oh,
Of course.
amazing.
Okay. All right.
And then we'll talk about Twin Peaks episode 8, which is
We're
of
gonna
course,
talk about.
the
We're gonna talk
totemic
about.
work of
We're
art.
gonna talk about.
I live in Queens.
Yes, great.
It's right near the Long Island Railroad.
Uh-huh.
So that's a hack. I might as well live in Manhattan if I'm dealing with the long.
Now you're near the LIRR stop.
That's right.
So not a ton of trains, but enough.
enough trains.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of trains going in every hour.
Yeah.
And it's less than like when ASCAT was at UCB Chelsea, I could leave my apartment at 6:45 and be in the green room at 7:01.
I mean, that is
That's
impressive.
wild.
I mean, but you gotta, do you just kind of sneak on? Or
Well, that's the other thing. You buy a bleep this. You buy it.
double bleep.
You buy it.
This is illegal. You're admitting to crimes.
You buy a punch card ticket.
Uh-huh. And then
And-
maybe they don't punch it because it's barely
Well, here's the
enough
thing.
time.
You
Yeah.
almost always get caught unless it's super crowded going from Penn Station. They almost always catch you then, but it's worth it. It's a cheap taxi ride. You know what I mean? Like you would never get a taxi ride that get you from
No,
there
I
to
get
there
you.
in 10
I get
minutes.
you.
This
No.
is fascinating because I've never heard you talk with such joy about any commute.
Well, because this is a good part of the other thing is
You had it right one time.
Penn Station, the staff on the train, the conductors, they're having to play a heavy duty, high intensity game of concentration, going up and down the train, trying to figure out
Who's new?
who's new.
Yeah.
And they don't always get me. You put your earbuds
Earbuds
in.
in,
Yeah,
right.
like you're asleep.
You had
Is
this
it worth their
all
while? Is it worth their while?
So
But you're not.
No, sorry, David, go on.
But you're not probably that far from and we can bleep this.
Not too far.
Right. So
A
those
lot
are
of
good
options.
too. Okay.
But I'll say this, getting to the Blank Check studio is hell.
Yeah. We are not best suited
Convenient
to
for you. I apologize.
No, but that's
Hey.
how much I want to be here to talk episode 8.
which we're going to talk about.
So you watch it. Do you watch it in this hotel room you've booked?
I remember watching it in the hotel
now,
room.
can you name the hotel?
Yeah, it was the 4 Points Chelsea.
Okay.
And
Respectable.
so it's one of those hotels that they've crammed a lot of little rooms in. It's not huge, but the bed's a nice size. And I watched it late at night.
On a laptop, I'm guessing, a Showtime Anytime kind of
I think I probably watched it on an iPad mini.
Wow. Okay, but on the app, we're saying you were not watching this. Yeah.
But this is also wired headphones. This is the day where you could plug your headphones right into the iPad.
I'm glad we're setting the scene. So this is, you're watching it the night of, but you're not watching it live.
Not watching it live.
Okay.
I'm watching it in like probably after 2 a.m.
Wow.
And I'm tired.
Yeah.
And
you got the Dana Ashbrook thing in the back of your head.
Which I was skeptical about. You know, when he said it to me, I'm like, this actor doesn't, he's just, episode 8 is going to be weird. I almost thought it was like a non sequitur. Like, oh yeah, there's going to be a real weird episode of Twin Peaks coming up. Oh yeah, they're all weird, you know? I really thought he was sort of joking until the episode hit. And there was like, let's say here's the other thing, which I guess I'll say this before the setup of what happens in the episode. This is all true, and I wish that I had documented it more specifically when it happened, because it's going to sound like the type of thing that someone could easily just make up to say that, oh, this is what happened. I had a dream months before the return began, and the dream was fixated on the fact that how are they going to have Bob in the new Twin Peaks when Frank Silva's
died,
long dead? In my dream, I was watching the new Twin Peaks. So I was sort of inside the new Twin Peaks watching it. And what I saw in my dream was a dark room where I could barely see. And there are a bunch of doctors who are surrounding Agent Cooper's body on an operating table. And they're opening up his stomach. And out of his stomach fly these orbs that have Frank Silva's head. They're like these comets that fly out into space.
You had a dream that basically predicted.
Right. Now, Lynch has used sort of orby imagery before. I could see where maybe you could be drawing from this, maybe, right?
Sure. There's like eraser heads, space, things like that.
Yeah.
But in the world of Twin Peaks, the idea of an animated sort of bob head on an orb flying around in space. And when the old man, when the woodsman ghosts come up out of the earth and start digging around in Mr. C's stomach, and they pull out an orb that it's kind of hard to see what it is.
Yes.
That it's Bob's face on the thing. Imagine watching that in the middle of the night when you're like sleep deprived, and the music itself is this kind of, and you kind of, it's hard. I've watched on lots of different screens with lots of different resolution. It's always a little bit of a struggle to make out exactly what's going on in that sequence. It kind of makes you feel like you're watching it with your glasses off or something. There's a very distorted, dreamlike feeling to it.
Do you folks ever have the experience of watching something late at night, perhaps when you are intentionally trying to fall asleep, putting something on to put yourself to sleep, right? And you start passing out, and then you like kind of like snap back for a moment. You're like, oh, the last scene was something I dreamed. I was watching something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I slowly faded.
You fall asleep, and then you kind of have a dream about the thing you're like, with the dialogue maybe that you're hearing.
Even if it's
in
branching and you're sort of like, I'm now starting to like, and then you're like, okay, time to turn this off, go to sleep, right? This is the only thing I've ever watched that feels like this when you're awake, where you're like, this is my brain riffing on the thing I was watching right before I fell asleep. So the fact that you had a dream about it. Yeah. Trying to like solve a story problem basically in your mind. A thing that, knowing how you think, being your friend for a while now, that you spend a lot of time internalizing these sorts of things. It makes sense that you would dream about it in anticipation.
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Because like it was exciting, and it also made it scarier to me.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Because it felt like he's pulling this from my subconscious.
Right. But or maybe your subconscious are just linked in some mystical way through the art he's created over the years. And that's sort of a lovely thing to think about.
It's really, because also if it was anything else, like if I went and saw Red One and then realized,
I mean,
I
you'd
had
be a lucky man.
if I went and saw Red One and
Connor's
then
pushing Red One on
and
me
then-
so hard.
if I went and saw
I
Red
know.
One and then
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you implying that you're not going to go
Can we
see it?
move through this sentence, please?
Okay.
He's about to say it for the fourth time.
And then I'm going to circle back.
if I went and saw Red One and then there was something in it that I'm like, I think I had a dream about that,
right.
I might have pulled it from the trailer. or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Whereas
I mean,
this
it's
was-
ubiquitous.
This was so locked down that there was really nothing that I dreamed could have been like, oh, well, you heard that it was going to be like this. It was just based on my thought of how are they going to
The
do
whole
this.
show was a mystery box.
But that's my experience watching episode 8, which I did not watch late at night at the 4 Points Chelsea, but I did watch with no preparation except that I thought I knew what Twin Peaks: The Return was at this point. And I was like, look, I could not have predicted it would be about, Kyle MacLachlan is this kind of dual personality, neither totally Mr. Cooper, but like, wow, I love that he's doing this. I'm into it. And then I start this episode and it starts with, Mr. C driving the other guy. What's the other guy's name? The other guy, the heavy.
Ray Monroe.
Ray. And you're like, yeah, okay, here we go. We're continuing the story of Twin Peaks: The Return, right? Like it doesn't start black and white, atomic bomb. Like it doesn't immediately start with that.
Yes.
It
okay.
starts like a
Yeah.
normal episode of Twin
Yes,
Peaks: The
pin in
Return,
that.
quote unquote normal episode, but still
Perfectly
you're like,
normal.
we're in this continuing
We're in this-
story he's telling.
He's got trackers on the car. Pull up close to another car. You press buttons on that thing. It removes the trackers. You throw the device out the window. This is how technology works.
And I think,
But it's the equivalent
yeah, I
of
love that he does that.
normal,
Boop, boop.
quote unquote, plotty scenes for Twin Peaks: The Return.
We're in this story, which I think is so crucial to this episode, because then when it starts to get weird, again, quote unquote weird, you have the thought of like, okay, well, this is going to be 5 minutes. We've had surreal imagery in this show so far. We've gone to the sort of purple sea and we've seen the fireman and these contraptions, like, all right, it's a bit of that. And then after a few minutes, you're like, are we not exiting this? And then after a few minutes, you're like, we're not exiting this. And I need to be like dipping my whole body into this, right? Like this is important. Like this isn't just fun Twin Peaks dream imagery that I can pour over later. Like no. This is a mantra for the show or whatever.
Do you remember if you watched this on broadcast or through like the app on streaming?
I watched it on my TV. I think I still had cable. I think I had like a DVR. I mean, not to brag, but this is 2017. I think I had like a true like DVR box, and I had like recorded Twin Peaks: The Return that way, right? You know what I mean? Like, so I was watching it. Like I remember in my living room. The living room. You two spent a fair amount of time
Big
in.
Nice, we used to call
at
it.
Big Nice, watching
Yeah.
commentaries with me and so on and so forth.
Brings me back.
And I was alone, but it could have even been the
Humble
daytime.
brag. Yeah.
And like it was just, I was like, okay, because my Forky didn't watch Twin Peaks: The Return. Like that it meant nothing.
But you were living together at that point.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's hard for me to like. I'm sure I've watched this in the daytime at some point over the past however many years, because this is the episode I've gone back to the most. But watching it in the deep, deep dark of night almost feels like the type of remember when there was going to be that Spielberg show on Quibi that you could only watch in the dark at night? That was
Do
the
I
idea.
remember? Yeah.
It almost feels like if any episode could only be accessed after the sun goes down, it would be this episode.
Do you remember this, David, when you were in charge of Quibi, the deal you made with Steven Spielberg? Do you remember this announcement?
Vaguely, yes, I do vaguely remember.
That Spielberg was like, kayfabe aside, my old buddy Jeffrey Katzenberg asked me to do something for Quibi, and I got intrigued by the opportunity of the technology, right? And Katzenberg's basically like, turnstile mode, look, it's like this. Spielberg was like, I don't give a shit. Could you do a thing where you could post something on the app that could only be watched at certain hours?
Right. Kind of like how you would play Pokemon
Yes.
and you'd have a clock on it. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, yeah, you can only catch the owl Pokemon at night.
And Katzenberg was like, I don't see why not. And he was like, I think it'd be fun to do a scary thing that you could only watch when the sun has gone down in whatever time zone you are in, which is kind of a cool idea.
It's so cool. I love
And then
it.
they announced that. And at no point did Spielberg do any work developing what that was. It was
Right.
just this constant
an
as
idea.
part of like Quibi is putting $1 billion into content. They just kept being like, and at some point, Steven Spielberg will start writing something that is spooky, which we promise you can only watch after sundown.
And that will happen eventually. Someone will make a thing that you can only watch at night.
Yeah.
It just is a matter of time.
I out of routine often watch the stuff for this podcast in the morning pre-record. Not always, depends on scheduling, right? But I'm just like, I like to be really fresh on stuff as much as I can because my brain is a sieve and things fall out of it immediately. I was like very tired last night and I had a busy day and a busy evening. And I was like, I know I need to watch this at night. I know if I wake up and try to watch this in the morning, it will not be correct. And I have felt that with a lot of Twin Peaks. Like a lot of it, I come here, I watch it on the screen we have here in the office, which is a windowless room, where even if it was during the day, it can sometimes feel like night.
Yeah,
but I
you turn
still
off 3 lights and you got yourself a nighttime.
I still wait for it to actually be the evening, and it feels like the right way to watch the show. In this episode, certainly. To your point, David, the fascinating thing about Twin Peaks: The Return is very quickly it just breaks any sense of you being able to predict what the show is, right? Like, this is not going to function like old Twin Peaks. It's not even going to function like David Lynch movies completely, right? And then, like, we're just going to cut out of scenes, cut to new characters. You saying, like, I was expecting this to be a regular episode. The notion of a regular episode at this point is know that you can't try to game out what this is going to be, right?
Yes,
like, give
right.
in to the chaos of it.
People maybe initially were sort of trying to do that of like, right, what are the theories we can think about? And it's like, it's not really.
I think by episode 7, people have probably settled into this is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I certainly had.
Me too. I also had, by episode 7, I thought I've outsmarted this. I know what this is. You can't surprise me.
I remember being on Twitter, Cursed Hell Site, in the year 2017, when this episode aired, and seeing people just go like, holy shit, that's the greatest thing that's ever aired on television. This is seismic. And without wanting to like have it spoiled, and people were posting still images, I was just sort of like, I gather he did something pretty experimental and somewhat non-narrative within the format of television. And over the years, I've heard people talk about this and show more images and whatever. But I did feel largely unspoiled in a lot of ways, outside of knowing this is somehow about the atomic bomb. Like, that was kind of the only thing I really knew about it, I want to say. And then I put this on last night, and I had the opposite thing of what you're saying, which is I was then unnerved and thrown off by it starting with 10 plus minutes of quote unquote normal Twin Peaks: The Return. I was like, isn't this supposed to be the crazy episode? When does this get crazy?
Right. This is Twin Peaks: The Return so far.
Right. I was like, I'm ready for this to be a completely standalone, like weird installation piece. That was my feeling of this. Was people turned on and just went like, what did they do with Twin Peaks? And so then that transition is even more bizarre, but yet coming at it from the wrong direction and the wrong order, it had the same effect on me of like, it does feel like reality is like ripping apart at the seams.
Yeah. Ben, when did you first see episode 8?
I watched it for this show.
Ben has been watching Return for the first time.
So you're okay. So what time of day were you watching when you got to 8? Were you prepared for 8 being weird?
Yes, because of the way
how I
went about
formatted it.
curated these episodes. So I did watch it very late at night. I want to say it was like 2 a.m. because I knew this was so hyped up
Assassin's
for me
Creed hours.
that by the time, yeah, for sure. That by the time it was like that, it was so late at night, but I was like, I'm on 8. I gotta do this.
Right. I'm intrigued. I want to, like, it's like there's a little sliver of light from behind the door and you're like, I want to open it.
Just to unpack this, Connor, Ben has like within like bouts of insomnia, will have like things he watches at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's like I've woken up and I can't fall asleep or I wasn't able to fall asleep. And it's often a rotation of he will watch the same thing 30 times for a couple months before moving on to something else. And they are usually, it's just like some inexplicable, he is connected to the tone or the imagery of this. It feels perfect that you watch this for the first time in basically that time slot.
You feel kind of like you're the only person who's awake at that time, you know, when you watch stuff.
I like that.
You know that feeling?
Yeah.
I'm the only little person here.
Okay, now I'm going to ask the dummy question.
Okay.
Can you guys explain to me what this is about?
When did you watch it?
Last night. I've only had like 12 hours to stew on this, and I didn't want to fucking dig into like reading a bunch of fucking recaps and analysis.
Well, we'll talk about what happens in the episode. First, I want to tie up two things.
You want to
tie up two things?
Oh, okay. Take out your string.
One, I forgot that Charlie Harper, the character in 2.5 Men, when he dies, that was the most watched episode of that show in history, like 25 million people or whatever. The first Ashton Kutcher episode is basically what it was.
Yeah, for comparison, this episode was watched by 250,000 people.
Right.
I forgot about timesing.
Melanie Linsky, who is a mild friend of mine, and of course is a famous person. Now, it's sort of crazy how Melanie Linsky, it's not crazy because she deserves all the...
But that she was like a regular on that show for 8 years.
Right, that she had the years on that show and kind of just in the mix of like, yeah, Melanie Linsky from Heavenly Creatures like is like on TV and in movies.
I remember like seeing her in The Informant and being like, it's nice that finally someone's putting her to work again. And then I'm like, oh, she spent 8 years on the most watched show in the world.
Like, I think she was a character who come in and out because she was his stalker, right? You know,
then
like,
they made her a regular.
She was a regular. Oh, she was a regular for at least some seasons. Yeah. I'm sure that was
I think it was the thing where she was like a guest star that then was so popular that they kept.
Right, and she's funny or whatever. I mean, I've not seen a lot of 2.5 Men over the years, but
that's one of the only episodes I've seen. The funeral.
I just remember that it's implied that she shoved Charlie in front of a train and he exploded like a balloon. She says, because he had like cheated on her again or whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, I just forgot that Melanie Linsky killed Charlie in 2.5 Men.
It's quietly the darkest TV show of all time,
right? Because Chuck Lorre had that strain to him.
Yes, but it's the most extreme version of it. Also, in that episode, Dharma and Greg attend the funeral.
Oh, really? Because it's sort of like the Lorre verse?
Right. Or maybe they come to look at the house because John Cryer's trying to sell it. I don't know. Whatever. Go on, David. I'm sorry. Keep tying things up.
The other thing I just wanted to ask you this. So today or yesterday or this week, John Krasinski was named People's Sexiest Man Alive.
Okay, if we're talking about national nightmares. Yeah.
And everyone's up in arms about it because they're like, John Krasinski, like in this day and age, like he's fairly bland. Like, and it's like, what guys, that means a lot of people turned it down. Like you have to remember, but this is not like
this is a weird year to do it. Is that fair to say?
It's a weird year to do it because what's he got going on?
Exactly.
I mean,
well, this was the year that we got our first work from the imagination of. So what's the sexiest organ in the human?
I forgot about that.
What's the biggest organ?
So what's the sexiest organ in the human body? It's the brain.
What are you talking about?
If his film, If.
What if?
And what's sexier than the possibility of something? If.
Now, he's 45.
I missed If.
Yeah, that's fine. You're doing great.
Yeah, watch it at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. You will feel like the only person on earth. Yeah. He is 45 years old. Which makes him one of the older sexiest men alive.
That's also weird. That's
a little surprising, right?
Right.
Now, obviously, everyone knows the oldest, sexiest man alive, people's sexiest.
Sean Connery.
Sean Connery was named that at 59 when he was fully in like Untouchables, bald dude.
And looked like the oldest man alive at 50.
But there was an argument of like, oh, he's been around forever and whatever.
But like Nolte was like 55.
Nolte was 51.
Yeah.
The others in their 50s were Paul Rudd recently was
I was going to say.
Ageless.
Harrison Ford was named at around 6 days, 7 nights time.
That's about 50.
56. And as of course, quite bizarrely, Patrick Dempsey got it last year, I guess, in conjunction with Ferrari, and he was 57.
Yes, and I feel like he had some other thing. I mean, this is...
And I remember I worked at People when he turned it down one year, and they named Matthew McConaughey instead. Or no, it was Damon. It was Damon that got it that year. Anyway.
But to your point, there is a lot of like press maneuvering around this title.
Well, you need the person you can't just sort of like be like, oh, they're the sexiest man alive and they don't want to talk to People magazine. People's like, well, we still think you're sexiest, so we're putting you on the cover no matter what. Like you need them to agree.
Right. Look.
Right. You can't do that to someone without their consent.
I mean, you can, but you're not going to get much out of
creepy.
it. Yes.
People magazine just bestowing it on unwilling people.
Paul Rudd. An incredibly handsome man, ageless, right? As you said, when he was dubbed People's Sexiest Man Alive, we're like, a lot of people were like, that's the title we're giving him now.
I mean,
and then the answer was, you're like, Ghostbusters Afterlife is in theaters 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, it's right. It just,
Krasinski, you're like, what is this even fucking tying into?
If
came out 6 months ago.
But before we talk
Available
about
on digital.
Okay.
before we talk about
Yeah, why are you bringing this up?
A
I just
sexy
wanted to
steelbook
ask
coming
you.
out soon, probably.
It's already out.
Is it?
They might have canceled
No, a
the
sexy
steelbook.
steelbook.
Okay.
It'll be different.
Second edition. The sexy edition.
Is the youngest, sexiest man alive people ever mentioned? Because I sorted by age just out of interest.
Do you have
and
the
I was
stat in front of
surprised
you?
by the answer.
I'm gonna
It's not-
guess. I'm gonna guess Baby Herman.
It's not Baby Herman.
Okay.
From whatever. Cartoons.
That's most sexist.
Oh, most sexist man alive.
He does. It's not Michael B. Jordan.
It's not Michael B. Jordan.
But I imagine he's on the lower
He
end.
was 33. He's on the lower end.
David, tell me the age of the youngest.
27.
27 was the
You're
youngest.
never going to guess this.
I'm
That's the
never
only
gonna
reason I
guess
bring
it?
it up. I'm going to give you one more guess.
Mark Herman.
No, Mark Harmon was 34. so
Okay,
not
I
a
just
bad
knew
guess.
he got it, so I'm trying to
The
think.
answer is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise won People's Sexiest Man Alive in 1990 when he was 27 years old. The only time they've named him thus.
So that is like Days of Thunder?
Yeah,
Time?
or sort of far
and
and away.
away.
Yeah.
You're a car, Shannon.
I think Days of Thunder came out in 1990, so I guess that would have been the explicit
Okay.
tie-in.
Yeah.
Isn't that just weird though that you're
Yeah.
like that he was the babiest, sexiest man alive
Yeah,
in
that is
People
weird.
magazine history?
Can I tell you, I gain a little bit of respect. I've never really given a lot of thought to People Magazine's process.
Mhm.
But 27, that's pretty. They've given a safe. That's a safe floor age wise. Go any lower, and you're just close to boyhood.
I would
100%.
also bet the average is like 45.
I think the average is in late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah, I just feel
somewhere
like they
that.
usually go for real grown-up men.
Right. Because that's their audience is, older women are reading People magazine.
I wish they would emphasize more that this is People's sexiest man who agreed to be sexiest man alive. And there should be a little list, a little sidebar that's like, here's who said no.
So in 2017, it was Bad Coop, right? Mr. C was the sexiest man alive.
Thank you for this title. He's like staring over your shoulder.
I see my best people did good.
I would be excited if it was Dougie,
Dougie Jones?
like Sexiest Man Alive, and it's like him, with like a tie on his head.
Yeah.
Does Dougie do it more than Mr. C in The Return?
Does Dougie do it?
Does Dougie do
Dougie
it
does
more?
it. I mean,
He
he
does
has
it.
sex.
Yeah.
Does he do it more?
Well, Dougie has sex. Does, without spoiling what's to come in the episodes I have yet to see, does Coop in Dougie's body do it?
Oh, right.
Because the transfer happens right after Dougie's
Yes,
done it.
he does. Right?
But I'm like, do we think that he's stupping Naomi Watts?
I think he does.
You think
Yeah.
he does in the episodes we've seen?
Doesn't he? He definitely has sex with her.
Yes, he does.
Yes, I just can't remember when it is.
Yeah, he
Okay.
does. He
Okay.
does.
Okay. So Dougie do it.
Dougie do it.
Dougie do it.
Anyway, episode 8 of Twin Peaks Return. Twin Peaks Return.
Twin Peaks, the return.
Does begin with Mr. C and Ray driving through the night, and it's kind of first. There's the kind of hilarious tracker device.
I love the
business.
technology that it all reminds me of those phones that you used to get that have the giant push buttons that are like for older people.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It just looks like someone worked up some special effects in like Excel. It's like a big yellow box and a big black
But
box.
every computer that's used in the,
Right. Is that
in the return feels like it's designed in that way, where it's just to look very clear. You type sentences in all caps.
I genuinely mean this. I love the shit that David Lynch just doesn't care about. You know, that it doesn't feel like, oh, he's just lazy, he's phoning this part in or whatever, where he's just like, this isn't important. Just come up with the simplest representational version of this. I'm not going to make like a fucking meal out of this. If it like translates enough for the audience to get it, this is like means to an end. What do I really want this episode to focus on, you know?
Yeah.
so they drive. I think there's this kind of awesome, and I do feel like it's getting you in the mood. Sort of couple minutes of just like you're watching the road and it's dark, right? Sort of Lost Highway vibes, right? You're just driving through this like total black, right?
But it's like
To some mystery
the trance
location.
like state these
Yeah.
episodes maintain, where you're like at any moment you're like, is the whole episode going to be set in this car, you know? Or are they going to cut away from this in like 10 seconds and never get back to this again for hours. There's
right.
not a sense of like temporal security while watching the show, in my experience.
He also will, like, if you look at some of these scenes, he'll have two people driving a car, cut to that classic Lynchian just shot of the yellow line of the point of view of the car sort of at the road, and then cut back to them talking, and then cut to that again. And you're like, most filmmakers would have one cut to that and not more unless they were having lots of time pass or something. But he'll sometimes just like, well, let's see this for a while now. Now let's cut back to them for some more.
Right.
Let's cut to it again. Like, it's sort of, he doesn't have...
It's a rhythmic thing.
Yeah, it's the amount of patience that he has for like how long we look at certain things.
Well, to your point, they're two different uses that most filmmakers would like have for that kind of cutaway, right? One is like time jump, as you said, and the second one is, oh, I had the scene play out in a 2-shot and I didn't get coverage and the scene's playing too long. So if we have a reverse of the road, that way I can cut to that and cut back and cut inner fat within the scene, which is the opposite of what he's doing. He's letting you watch them in silence for minutes. Like, he's actually using it to stretch time out more rather than to compress.
I also, there's and we talked about this on the previous episode where we got into it a little bit, where I declared that The Missing Pieces counted as a standalone feature film.
Yes,
sure.
sure.
Right, you guys came to blows.
And then
we don't need to revisit that.
But if you look at, I just rewatched Blue Velvet, and the deleted scenes for Blue Velvet, which are pretty significant length, and it's a lot of it is just establishing that Jeffrey is at school and dating Megan Mullally, and then his father has a health episode and he comes back to stay there. All stuff that's established just by him showing up in his first scene, like, yeah, sure. I'm here.
Right, he just says that stuff.
Yeah,
and there's almost like
I have seen the Megan Mullally. I think she's posted the clip or whatever.
Yeah.
She's got like kind of feathered hair.
It does add an element of like, he's not just involved with two women, that he's also got a girlfriend at school.
College.
It does add an element of that. He's more of a he's a 3-woman man, not a 2-woman man.
Sure.
In that movie.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, like, if you look at most of David Lynch's movies, there are a lot of pretty significant deleted scenes that don't make their way. And Fire Walk with Me being the biggest example, where you have literally a feature film's worth of deleted scenes with other characters, other things going on.
Inland has that to cut in a Fire Walk with Me way of like a semi-side feature. And a Wake Up Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lynch makes a lot of Wake Up Ron Burgundys.
Lynch loves Wake Up Ron Burgundy. Yeah.
And
the alarm clock gang should have made the theatrical cut.
I should have put Gethard in the main cut of part 2.
Why are all other filmmakers afraid to put Gethard in the theatrical?
All different jokes from different takes.
It's a bizarro cut, like Wanderlust.
The same story beats, but new jokes in every scene.
Every joke is an alt.
Anyway.
You know what's the kind of crazy, fucked up shit Lynch would do?
What's that?
Make a movie that's only Gethard and cut everyone else out as a fuck you to the studios.
Let's bring Gath. I'd like to think that he would call him Gath. The way he calls Kyle MacLachlan Kale. He'd be like, let's bring Gath in for a Gath take.
What was your point?
My point.
Okay.
No. My point was.
And don't worry, we're going to circle back to this later.
One of the producers, I can't remember the name of the producer who said this, on The Return, was asked, like, are there deleted scenes from The Return?
Sabrina Sutherland.
And she said,
I saw this quote.
She basically said no.
Yeah.
And I do think that, and I don't say this as this is going to sound like a burn. I love The Return. I do think I've never seen something where I was more quickly convinced that everything that was shot had been used.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that maybe would have been cut, I love that it exists. It's magic. This thing is magic. But yes, any studio in their right mind would be like, we're fucking cutting him spray painting the shovels.
Well, look, that's the first moment that came to mind.
Right, we're cutting Ashley Judd just walking around the room being like, I don't know if I hear something, like shit like that. But like, of course that has to be.
But even the shovels thing, like, any other filmmaker would be like, look, let's get 2 minutes of footage so we have options, and then we'll pick the best 10 seconds to use. And David Lynch is like,
no, the whole
4
sequence.
Continuous minutes. And then you're like, what about the other angle you shot? And he's like, that's its own 4 minutes in another episode.
There's a thing that directors will say when they're filming.
And Gethard is holding the shovel.
There's a thing that a director will say when they're filming something that they may or may not use. And they're like, well, it's just so we have it.
Yes.
And I do feel like Twin Peaks: The Return could have been called Twin Peaks just so we have it.
And even beyond that, at times you watch it and you're like, where's the main footage? It feels like you're watching a Missing Pieces, Well,
and obviously there are
plot beats,
I think there were a lot of fans who that was their exact reaction to the show initially was like, no, but where's the actual plot line of the show of Cooper reuniting with his buddies at the sheriff's office?
Is Annie okay?
To maybe rescue Laura or Annie or to defeat Bob once and for all.
I like that comment.
Right.
And this is why I think The Missing Pieces is such a perfect bridge between Firewalk with
Call
Me
it a movie.
to The Return, because I do think that the 21st century Lynch is more, this is his rhythm of storytelling, which is sort of like a little bit less worried about like, does this move the story forward? And a little bit more like, let's put it all in there. That The Missing Pieces sort of all work together in the same sort of rhythm that I think they really prepare you for the rhythm of The Return, which is like the thing you think you want, you may or may not get it, but you're going to get a lot of stuff that if someone had given notes to The Return, if Lynch came to someone and said, I got to cut this down to 10 episodes, it would not be hard. You could easily do a 10 episode cut of this that would hit all the main beats you need to hit. And then you'd have like a Missing Pieces style thing that's like, oh, here's like Harry Truman's
Frank Truman. Jesus.
Him on the phone with Dr.
Russ Tamblyn?
No.
Warren Frost.
Frost's dad.
Yeah. That is a great example of a scene that could have been, if there was a Twin Peaks: The Return, The Missing Pieces, where it's like, we really want to, it's nice to see this character, but it doesn't move forward any like of the chess pieces.
Or I think more realistically, a version of that scene that is cut down to 30 seconds that is just like, we're just letting the audience know where he is and moving on. They just need to see his face for 5 seconds. Isn't it nice that we got him in a Skype window?
In episode 8, after the part where they pull Bob out of the stomach of
let's just go through this because we're almost there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they get to this hill, right? And Ray shoots Coop.
He goes to
Mr.
take a
C,
leak
right
in the woods. Coop's got a gun. You think he's about to pull out on him. Then you see that he also has
Ray
a gun.
has anticipated that he's in trouble. So he shoots Coop.
Turns around, Coop's
Mr. C,
gun is empty.
He left an unloaded golden gun in the glove compartment for
Classic.
Mr. C.
Mr. C falls, and you're like, okay, big twist. We'll see what...
Calls him a fucker, too.
Pretty rude of him.
That's kind of even ruder than the gunshots,
and
I would almost argue.
I'm not trying to sound like some naive fool who is like, I really had a handle on Twin Peaks: The Return up to this point, and I was like completely grasping everything it was doing. But nonetheless, him like falling to the ground and then suddenly a bunch of sooty woodsmen emerging from the forest, like kind of fading in and out of reality, and then just kind of going like, I don't know how, I'm just doing
and for the
what
listener,
they do.
David's doing an incredible, I don't know where he conjured the emotion
He pushed back from the desk and started paddling his hands frantically in the air, eyes closed. He really got into it.
But it was like he was conjuring something. Like David was like in touch with spirits from another plane.
I felt so helpless watching that sequence when they come out of the earth and start dancing around and Ray falls to the ground. I felt like Ray. I felt like I, as a viewer, had like lost control of my point of view watching it.
You're just like, I have to pay attention because this is dark and mysterious what is happening. They seem to sort of like smear mud and blood all over him, right? And then they, as you say, they all this crazy shit, is happening. But it's my favorite thing about David Lynch, where you're like, there's actual sort of like plotty import to what is going on, and yet this is also imagery that I could pore over and have thoughts about, have theories about, or interpretations of for the rest of my life, and it'll be just fine too.
Well, I do want to hear you unpack both sides of that.
So basically they tear, a ball, as sort of Connor was basically setting up,
with
Bob's face in it, out of Mr. C.
Mm-hmm.
And they sort of show it to Ray.
Right. Here's the evil. It's right here.
It presumably is covered in some sort of viscous fluid, so it could be considered one saliva Bob ball.
Well, Connor, well done.
And, there's sort of a plainness to how Lynch thinks about this stuff or presents this stuff, right? And it was true in original Twin Peaks too, right? Where it's like, you'll know that Leland is possessed by Bob because Leland will look at the mirror and then his face will just turn into Bob's face and back. And he's like, this isn't more complicated than you think it is. Like, that's what I want you to understand here. And so in the same way where it's like, do you know what's inside Mr. C kind of making him work? It's like, Bob, his head in a globe, kind of like, and it's inside of his tummy. I just want you guys to get that.
You talk about the feeling of losing control, right? I feel like whereas his use of time in this show, in this season in particular, feels like up until this point a lot of like forcing you to live in things and recalibrate away from the rhythms you're used to. The way he uses the various effects for the rest of the episode at this point does feel like he is forcing you to stay in these things for an uncomfortable amount of time that creates its own tension, if that makes sense. And it also is the thing that it is kind of astonishing and inexplicable how much he is able to get so much visceral power out of using the most basic sort of like original language of trickery in cinema. Right? Where it's just like, he's like, if I basically do a digital version of a double exposure, a thing that has been done since
fucking Méliès.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like one of the first building blocks of film language of like, here's weird shit you can do with cameras. And he's just like, that's somehow more evocative, or at least I know how to make it more evocative than what a lot of other people I think would over conceptualize as like, as you're saying, like, what's the simplest version of this? And does that have some weird power to it?
It's also interesting to me and we'll talk about this in other parts of the episode, because throughout the return, there's a little bit more of a digital look to this series. And very often there are effects that are very cheap looking.
Simple.
But digital looking cheap effects that are very much on purpose, because you look at what a lot of the things in this episode that are essentially effects, and they are not at all cheap looking. They are like some of the best, most beautiful looking digital effects. I almost feel dirty using the word digital to describe them.
But then you also get shit like when there's like the extended sequence of the people entering and exiting the general store. And it's basically like weaponizing the language that we're used to of what it feels like when you're watching something that starts glitching out, when your service is interrupted.
Yeah.
It's like so unnerving to like, I am watching this on a disc and my brain cannot stop going like, is the player malfunctioning? And I know from like second 2, like this is clearly an intentional Lynch thing, but making us sit in that for like minutes does something to your brain where you're just like, this is wrong. I'm used to panicking when this happens and then like checking my Wi-Fi or like checking the cables or like hitting a device. There's something unnerving about how much
it's well described.
Simplifies it. And as much as, yes, you're saying in this episode, he shows you that like, I could make the effects look perfect if I wanted to. Sometimes there's something more disconcerting about like, why is it that simple?
So whatever, this thing is revealed. Ray, as I would, runs away.
They're smearing the blood all over.
Yeah, but Ray's like, I'm getting the
C's
fuck out of here.
Right.
He runs away. There's a scene.
He calls.
This phone call is probably one of the funnier, unintentionally funnier things in the episode, which is his description of what happened.
Let me.
Yeah.
In fact, I can probably read the dialogue. He calls, who he's calling is Jeffries, right? But it's sort of, it doesn't really matter. But that's for nerds like you or I to think about the fact that Philip Jeffries, the David Bowie character, who is now a giant teapot, is like directing an agency against Mr. C. That's a spoiler in the weirdest way possible. It's not really important to the show in any way, but I guess if you want to know it, you can.
Bowie had passed away by this point already.
Bowie had
in real life.
Bowie was supposed to be.
He was supposed to be in it, or maybe at least lend his voice to it. And he had died in 2016, and I think it just didn't happen.
But everything we've described so far happens basically within 10 minutes, right? And then the phone call happens around minute 11.
I think he's dead, but he's found some kind of help. So I'm not 100%. And I saw something in Cooper. Maybe the key to what this is all about.
And then, of course, we're like, oh my God, big revelations coming. Cut to Nine Inch Nails performance.
The Nine Inch Nails.
The Nine Inch Nails. Presented by the MC character here, we basically have not seen in the previous musical performances. We're obviously getting like a Roadhouse musical number in almost every episode, if not every episode. But I feel like this sort of like MC character speaking to the mic with the pine cone.
Yeah, sure.
I don't remember seeing. Just as you're saying, like doing the sort of introduction, ladies and gentlemen, the Nine Inch Nails, as if they're the fucking SNL musical guest. Feels like a new frame for these performances.
It's his first appearance.
Okay.
He has several more though, so we will see him again.
And I will say, I'm not going to spoil this. There will be a point where we see him again. I won't be around to discuss it with you.
And I'll miss you dearly.
But when it happens, I'll say to you, there is a contender for what I think is the most surprising moment in all of Twin Peaks: The Return. At least purely just in terms of like, if you'd given me 1,000 guesses, I never would have guessed this would be a thing that would happen.
Do you think you know what he's talking about, David?
I'm not sure. I'd love to. There's so many things to think about. But the Nine Inch Nails performance, we should just say, that is the sort of demarcation point. We don't know it at the time, but it is unusual in the show right now for there to be a musical act in the middle. Usually that's the
not
the
all,
button.
but a lot of them. Right. That's the end of the episode. Yeah.
And it's 9 Inch Nails, right? It's not just
it's a big get.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's this incredibly, vivid performance. Trent's got his sunglasses on. He's wailing. Go ahead.
They're
Ben.
projecting sort of digital static over them.
Like as a live effect. It's not like a video image manipulation of how they're filming it. It's like from the tech booth. Yeah, at the Roadhouse.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know this song, She's Gone Away?
Are you a Nine Inch Nails guy, Connor?
No, not really. I know very little about it. I was looking up the lyrics to this before. It was
like a recent song. Like it was from a recent EP. Ben, do you care for this song? Or?
I'm not really that up on late career Nine Inch Nails, but I like the song. I think it's crazy how much he doesn't seem to age, Trent Reznor.
It's true.
He's so hot still.
The wild thing for me is just the last 10, 15 years turn of him becoming jacked as hell.
Well, yeah, he is
I feel like he was always like this weird, emo, wispy, like weirdo, sensitive, dark goth guy. And then at some point he started looking like the bully in an 80s teen comedy.
I think he got sober.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a natural progression to eventually getting yoked.
I just remember my first exposure to the idea of Trent Reznor was Celebrity Deathmatch, where the puppet looked like he was like like a scarecrow or some shit, And it was like, oh, he's like this weird, moody guy. And I believe they gave him literal 9 Inch Nails. I just looked it up. He was fighting
Did
Puff
he?
Daddy.
Yeah, Puff Daddy. Because it's rap versus rock.
Yes, they made them represent the two sides.
Celebrity Deathmatch is one of those things that when that was on, when I was like 12, we were all like, this is like the pinnacle of art.
Oh, it was.
And I'm sure if I watch it now, I would be like, this is fucking
I've tried
so
to go back
bad.
and watch them.
Like, not funny at all.
I wouldn't say it's bad, but it is bizarre to watch now.
Uh-huh.
I think there is good craft behind it, let me
Sure.
say. But you're just like, yes, exactly. When I was like 10 years old, I was like, I treated every episode of Celebrity Deathmatch as if it were part 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return, where I was like, the rules have been rewritten. How can anyone make TV after this? Eric Fogel's done it again.
We should also shout out Atticus.
Atticus Ross.
Atticus Ross. People,
Is a member of Nine Inch Nails. I think he got added.
he's basically
later.
the only other permanent member now, right?
And he does his scores with him, obviously, and he's a lovely British man. I've talked about it on the show.
People got angry we didn't give enough
Avuncular
credit when
is.
we've talked about Reznor Ross scores.
Oh Lord. Okay. Well, people get angry about everything. Anyway, I just love the performance. It's cool anyway, but as a mood setter,
It's
and
it's
then
a-
Mr. C like pops up when it's over.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
you
a real like when you, especially once you know what the whole episode is. I look at that as like this is the moment where Lynch decides like we're breaking the form completely. We're gonna just have a full musical number, which is not something that scripted television dramas do.
Credits not playing over it, not cutting to like dialogue happening between Roadhouse patrons in between. Like it's just fully right.
We're about 15 minutes into the show.
And-
It's a
and-
45-minute
and
or
looking-
more than that.
And
55
looking
minutes.
at like the lyrics to that song, it does feel like a very I mean, I'm sure this is true of a lot of, but I mean, you dig in places till your fingers bleed, spread the infection where you spill your seed. Does feel like a lyric that you could put over the images of the woodsman like digging through Mr. C's stomach.
Who do you think the woodsmen represent, or what the woodsmen
I need you
are?
to start
They're such a-
unpacking all of this.
We're such a big part of Twin Peaks: The Return, but of course they're in Fire Walk with Me in this sort of kind of goofier way where they're like guys in flannel. They're in The Missing Pieces. Jürgen Prochnow, I always like to shout out, is in like one shot with a giant fake beard as one of the woodsmen. I'll show you.
He's also in one shot of the theatrical,
Maybe
is he
it's-
not? I
maybe-
believe
then I
so.
can't remember.
Yeah.
I would say like the first indication when you have season 1 of Twin Peaks, the first sort of indications of the supernatural things that will immediately start happening in season 2 is them talking about there's like something in the woods. There's like it's this, you know, Cooper's talking about how fascinated he is. What are these trees? And all the shots of the woods and everything. But when like Sheriff Truman and Big Ed start talking to him about how there's something in these woods, I feel like the woodsmen are just the natural way of like, it's either that or you'd have the trees come to life, you know, like just a way of representing. I don't know what they want. I don't know what their goals are, what their aims are. I don't know whose side they're on. I tend to think they're bad.
Well, they seem to mostly, I mean, they're very malevolent in this episode. They generally are in the convenience store and all these sorts of like liminal spaces that we see over the course of the show, which are, you know,
We see that-
dark places.
that
the
one
Black
is, like,
Lodge.
A few cells away from Matthew Lillard in the second episode, and one's sitting there and then he just floats away. There's a lot of stuff where I'm just like, I like this. I don't know what it means, but I like the feeling I get. I'm always excited when they show up.
But what we're seeing, so Mark Frost has said that the sort of origin of so much of the whatever mythology of Twin Peaks comes from the detonation of the first nuclear bomb, right? That's what the episode 8 is about. And I think it annoys some fans in a way to be so direct about it, right? Like to be like almost, it's not a basic observation that like some new unnatural kind of evil like was created that day, but it is
I think the woods, the woods
still feels profound to me.
The woodsman and the Black Lodge and the White Lodge and all this stuff feels older than that.
They've been around in some form, right?
Yeah, but Bob, this guy dressed in denim, long hair,
Sure.
like he's new.
But is some of this I'm going to ask dumb questions because you guys have been thinking on these things for
That's
years,
fine.
if not
So
decades,
the
and I'm
next-
new to all of this, right?
The next shot, to be clear, after Mr. C wakes up, is the slow motion shot of the nuke going off, the Trinity test.
Is the feeling that something like the nuclear bomb, right, this man-made evil, somehow collapsed this wall between, as you're saying, these sort of ancient spiritual forces and the tangible reality, that's sort of like the thing that started to curse Twin Peaks is the demolishing of that barrier.
Yeah. And we literally see this floating weird creature barf up a bunch of stuff, and one of the bubbles has Bob in it.
Yes, this sort of odd creature, which is maybe Judy, right? Is sort of like, right, this sort of this entity that gets brought up a lot in Twin Peaks lore.
I will say that like this stuff is all more fun to watch and
I
experience
agree.
than it is to talk about.
I agree. Some people got mad at me for saying that last week, though, and I do want to, acknowledge that yes, some people love to delve into this lore in a deeper way, and that's fine.
It all sounds kind of stupid when talked about. And I think one of the things that's like Twin Peaks, it's this thing where they're great at setting up questions, and I think generally terrible at answering those questions. I think one of the things that's so great about episode 8 is that it actually probably provides more tangible answers than any other episode of Twin Peaks.
That's what's kind of bewildering
It's
about
the
episode
weirdest
8 in a
version
way.
of an explainer episode in its form.
Yeah, because basically, if you wanted to give the TV Guide spoiler summary of the thing, you'd say a nuclear bomb unleashes Bob into the world. Then the giant or the fireman or whatever he's called now, and I want to get her name right because it's such a great character name. Senorita Dido or Dido, Senorita Dido,
right?
And the giant basically create the spirit of Laura Palmer as a counterbalance to the evil of Bob, and then young Sarah Palmer, when the woodsmen knock everybody in her hometown out, this winged frog creature
Weird bug
climbs
thing.
into her body.
Grasshopper frog. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like this origin story of like Judy or Jaudet and Bob and Laura and all these things are all created in this crazy. But I also like what I enjoy about the episode is not any of the things that like I like that Sarah Palmer isn't identified as Sarah Palmer in the episode.
Yeah, I did not get that.
No,
I'm
it's
getting this
something-
now.
It's something you kind of
It's something that Mark
realize-
Frost confirms in one of the books that comes along with it. And it's a thing that occurred to me when I watched it, but she's just called Young Girl. And it's more fun to wonder than it is to have it, yes, that's definitely her. And
the boy is Blue Beetle, right?
The boy is Blue Beetle. You're saying it's the actor who plays Blue Beetle?
Correct.
Or
the
this is David Lynch entering the DC Cinematic Extended Universe.
the boy is Blue Beetle. Bring Gaff in for a Gaff take.
the girl.
His uncle is George Lopez in a winning supporting turn.
Very fun. No,
Big Lake.
we not to jump ahead, but just to jump ahead, we see this girl in Los Alamos go on a date with a boy
Mhm.
from her school,
Who
or
is
whatever.
Blue Beetle?
And that actor is
Okay.
is the kid who plays Blue Beetle. Anyway, no. First, we see this imagery of the bomb
Is
for
that-
minutes. It's so cool.
I mean, yeah.
This like crazy visual show of fire and static.
That's just computer animation, right?
I mean, yeah.
Why does that shot look so good?
It looks incredible. I don't know.
Why?
But
Why does
is it computer animation? Do we know that for a fact?
I don't fucking know. Don't ask me.
David,
Well, what would it be
David!
otherwise?
Yeah, I like. You mean like? Is it a bomb they set off? Like
I don't know. Like Christopher Nolan made such a big deal of like, I'm doing this all in camera, right?
he did, but I mean,
And I certainly
he
think
lied?
when we
Though.
get to
He lied.
he lied.
He lied, and people died.
well, and the
And
thing
now I'm
about
not saying there's a connection. It's just that since Christopher Nolan told those
You're
lies,
saying there are human
there are
beings who
people who
have
have
died
perished since then. Nolan lied, and
Yeah.
people died.
Yeah.
Causality is not.
You can look it up. There are people who died the day after Oppenheimer was released in theaters. It's just a fact.
It's just a fact.
It's just a
it
fact.
wasn't all practical.
We're not drawing any connections. No, I'm just saying, especially some of these, like the ensuing shots where you're seeing just sort of like particle matter and things like that. I could imagine some of that being practical, but I also could believe it's digital. I don't know.
Part of me doesn't ever want to know how they did it. When I look at that shot, I can't believe what I'm looking at. It's so hypnotic. It's always more, no matter how many times I watch that shot, it's always more impressive even than I remember it being. Each time I feel like I experience it anew. It is in a career full of really, really powerful imagery. I feel like the part of David Lynch that's like, I'm a painter, but I want to use cinema as my way of making these paintings. I feel like that shot is one of his it's just such an unprecedented masterpiece in his body of work. Like this whole episode is like a greatest, it is just like if you had watched the first 7 episodes and thought, some people were like, they watched and like, it's not like the old Twin Peaks.
It is CG. I'm looking right now.
Yeah.
At the visual effects house. BUF has a big page on all the work they did on this episode.
You're right that it does look incredible. I also think
it's 11 minutes of full CG. They said
that sound. That was visceral, Connor. Whatever just happened to you.
It's also funny to think of that shot, and you haven't watched, I assume, any of there's a really long, like behind the scenes documentary about the making of The Return, Griffin.
I got the big box here.
Right.
I will be watching it. I've been avoiding it because I don't want to get spoiled on things I haven't gotten to in the series.
Well,
yet.
there's a sequence where he gets really mad, and it has to do with there's a lot of times where something will have to be made out of like paper mache or something, and Lynch will be just personally like stirring something in a bucket. And they have the wrong stuff for him. And he's like, God damn it. He's like so angry.
Well, that's like the story of him being so frustrated that he wanted to do all the makeup for Elephant Man himself. And they were like, David, this is a Paramount movie. You can't be like in the makeup like trailer applying shit to John Hurt for hours every day. And he's like, I can figure it out.
Lots of imagery that is wonderful, like inside the bomb.
Sorry, I just want to unpack this for a moment. I love the Trinity test sequence in Oppenheimer, right?
Yes.
And
I mean, yes.
And I love like that it was done practically, just as like a sort of antidote to what we're used to of how these things look. A criticism I have heard about that sequence from people is like, what is happening when an atomic bomb goes off is so much more complicated and terrifying than any usual explosion, right? That is the underlying enormity of what this weapon was and why it was so scary. And the Trinity test is a little bit more of just like, what's an incredible way to depict an explosion on screen? I feel like this granular digital thing that Lynch is getting at somehow evokes more of the like matter is being like pulled apart.
100%. Look,
kind of thing.
I love the Trinity test sequence in Oppenheimer,
I do too.
but not for the explosion itself, which is honestly just fine. And he only uses it sparsely. It's all about the build up and the characters and how, how tense they are about it. And, that's what's so cool about it. And the way the flash is done is cool.
I'm just saying
the fireball
this
itself kind of looks just okay because Nolan, I think, was really trying
great. But yeah,
to do it practically.
But like Lynch, who you don't think of as a CGI heavy filmmaker, is able to capture some sort of thing of like the terror of this, which is like as much as it is like sort of hypnotizing and to a certain degree beautiful imagery, you're also like there's something really scary about just like watching the particles for this long and thinking about what is producing them.
The lighting of it, the flashing, and the like it gets dark and then there's like a flash color and you're feeling like you don't even know physically where the camera is. It's like in this cloud, this storm.
When you like read the accounts of the folks who were working at Los Alamos, they talk about it that way, where they were just like, it was incomprehensible what we were witnessing. Like colors you can't explain, like time slowing down, like, it's what's horrifying about this existing as a technology.
I wonder how aware Lynch was of, because I have to feel on some levels completely deliberate, that in the first 7 episodes of this, some of the digital effects are so crude that they're just not even pretending they're anything other than computer effects. it's just there's no pretense of it. You're in the Black Lodge, and it doesn't look like the Black Lodge from the ABC television version. It's a different, more digitally looking thing. That in some ways it's setting you up that when this happens, your mind won't be able to process how good it looks.
That's what happened to me. Yeah, because I also look, I didn't think he set off an actual atomic bomb for the sake of filming episode 8 of his television show, right?
No, he didn't do that.
But I was watching it because he's established a language of when there are effects, they purposefully look very unnatural. That to see the realism of this, I was like, was he compositing practical elements together? Did he film some weird faked version of explosion, composite into a background?
CG.
To hear that it's all CG, your brain does kind of, I think what you're saying, like, it doesn't know how to process it.
What's the sound too that's being played?
Oh, it's just me going.
Is that what it is?
There is
Well, wait a
there's
second,
a piece
David,
of
that's
music.
a conflict of interest. You didn't disclose that you worked on this episode going...
There's a piece of music playing during the test that is the, I want to get this right, Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima, which is a piece of classical music that was composed in reflection on the bombing of Hiroshima years later. So that's obviously, but then it's also, crazy Lynch sound effects are playing. Then we see the convenience store, which is this sort of Black Lodge-esque, maybe even sort of a scarier place than the Black Lodge, right? Like,
I'd rather go to the Black Lodge than to that convenience store.
I feel like there's this implication that that's where really bad shit goes down, and the arm or characters like that sort of shuttle between, but you go to the convenience store for some sort of nasty stuff. Because when you see it in Fire Walk With Me, it's also where kind of bad transactions are happening.
Black Lodge is scary and unpredictable, but it's clean.
It's clean.
There's some
sort of
art.
fancy.
Wait, so we've been to the convenience store and in the past?
In Fire Walk With Me only?
Is it future or is it past?
Or sorry, it's appeared on the
Yes.
show.
But it looked like you would be forgiven for not realizing that what we've seen before is that, because we haven't seen the outside of the convenience store before.
It was only
That-
inside. It
in
was
Fire
in
Walk With Me, when it's like a room full of Bob and the man from another place.
And there's like people
and,
dancing around.
and that guy
the
with the weird
kids.
long
yeah,
nose.
Yeah, yeah.
That's upstairs of the convenience store, which Mike, the one our man used to talk about, is upstairs. I believe it was convenience store.
Huh. Okay.
But when we see it here, it's the awesome David Lynchy black and white, like stutter step, what's been going around like Beatles, but it's all like sort of,
And it
flashing
Goes on.
for a while.
and we have basically a period of this segment. I can never keep straight the order of some of these things.
I'm watching
Yes,
it
you're
here.
watching it
I'm,
right
I'm
now.
sort of going in sequence just to remember exactly this. Yes.
There is a sequence where essentially you're like, oh, we're watching something that is 2001: A Space Odyssey for television.
I think that's exactly right. You're watching an abstract depiction of the sort of like development of some new kind of malevolence, right? Like, that's what, and these guys are these busy little evil worker bees around this kind of like post-war symbol, the convenience store, right? Like, it looks like an old gas station from the 50s kind of, and it's just like, right, it's like that's how I'm taking all of this.
But let's also say, like 2001, it's coming after 2 hours of more conventional narrative storytelling in a movie, more conventional, right? And then throughout that abstract expressionist sequence, you're cutting back to Keir Dullea. Like, they are recentering you in like, this is what this
He's feeling this.
character
Yeah.
you have been through is experiencing. This has no grounding viewpoint in
Not
that way.
particularly.
He's making you the audience member.
And no precedent in
View
the
through
series or world of Twin Peaks. Like, we've seen
Yes.
Twin Peaks in multiple forms, and this is the first time we've ever been just sounds and shapes.
Then we see, yes, this kind of figure, which the experiment is how it's referred to, but it's this kind of feminine blobby body floating in space and makes this kind of weird chain of vomit, and Bob's head emerges from that.
And it's another thing where I remember back to both moments when I was watching it for the first time, tired in a hotel room with all the lights out, just watching the screen, that when you're seeing Bob, you could easily miss what you're seeing. It's not like it's subtle the way he does this.
It is. You have to kind of focus on this brief image that kind of swishes by you. And then we see this sort of golden imagery and a golden blob. Maybe sort of a nicer vibe, one might think. Again, this is why I'm kind of like, it's so funny that Twin Peaks can be thought about so deeply, but then also David Lynch is like, yeah, there's the golden people. That's the nice people.
Good blob versus bad
Right.
blob.
The angels are coming.
Spray Gath up with the gold hair spray and paint and makeup for a golden Gath.
I want a golden Gath.
You've got,
Just so we have it.
and then we're on the Purple Sea, which is this. We've seen this image before a little bit.
Mhm.
When have we seen this?
Episode 3.
Yeah, when
Part 3.
when Cooper was kind of moving his way through, from the Black Lodge
After
back
he,
to the real
he
world.
fell out of the Black Lodge, landed in that little box in New York City.
So is it post the box?
Post the box.
Got it.
He goes and he
Tiny Cooper falls down in a little thing, and then he's in that little room where something's trying to get in.
and
yeah.
there's Briggs's floating head and all that stuff. That all we've seen a little bit of that. We're back there.
Question is, it's been a long time since I saw Dune. You guys saw more fresh. Are the Purple Sea parts? Is that Dune?
Yeah, it's Dune.
Okay.
Mhm.
The
That's Dune.
worm floats by.
That's
and,
the planet Dune.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah. No,
That's
good,
Dune.
great question. And
Freddie
we got
Jones is there.
a good answer for you. Cat in a box.
And so there's this castle atop the Purple Sea, and that's where the giant lives.
You're
I mean,
right.
I don't know how else to describe this.
There's a castle on the Purple Sea where the giant lives.
And there's also this woman, Senorita Dido, who we only see in this episode, played by Joy Nash, who's sitting there as well.
She's sitting on the couch. They have a sofa in this
Yeah,
castle.
I would say it looks comfy in there.
It looks very cool. It's an
so
awesome piece of
beautifully
design.
designed.
Yes.
It has a 50s kind of aesthetic, would we say, or maybe even
Yeah.
like older aesthetic. I
Sort
don't
of this steam-y thing is going on too. Like there's a phonograph, there's the big kettle thing. There's a lot of clanking. And the fireman or the giant or whatever you want to call him is there. Played by Carol.
And
What a face.
credited
Old
as
him.
credited as a series of question marks.
Credited as like 8 question marks. Yeah.
Even David Lynch and Mark Frost were like, we don't know what the fuck this is. You've got me. Seems weird. We couldn't figure out what he was. We know that they live in a castle on the Purple Sea. We don't know who this guy is. This fella. Wish he'd tell us.
His face, it's so different from him in, the TV show, in the ABC show. Like that he's so old and he's kind of drawn.
You're talking about Carol
Stricken.
Yeah.
He
I know.
and Mike, I think, both have that thing that, there was every few years there'd be one of those apps that shows up that everyone starts having fun with, where it's like, oh,
Here's how I look if I'm old.
you type in your email and it shows you what you look like in a painting.
Right.
And
Just type in your social security number
It-
right
it
here.
usually
By the
happens
way,
for-
it's training AI.
it's fun for 3 days. Then someone's like, don't do this. They're scraping your account and using all this. And I did one of those and I didn't post it. I tried like 5 different paintings, put me in a painting. They all had my face basically do what happened to Mike and the giant, which is that something sort of, you get older and your face sort of like, it like kind of deteriorates in a way that makes me a little sad. And so none of mine were postable because they were all kind of like, oh no. And it was consistent enough that I'm like, they know something, because everyone else was having fun looking paintings and my face just like caved.
Yeah, but Connor, that's unnecessary to use that program. We all know if we want to see a picture of what you'll look like as an old man, we can just pull up the Weeknd's Dawn FM album cover that inexplicably looks identical to Connor in 40 years.
Now. It looks like me now.
Look,
I know. I know.
It looks
what
like me
you're referring
sprayed
to.
up as George Lucas.
it looks like if you continued spraying up until you hit George's real age. I don't think The Weeknd looks like you under any other circumstances.
I can see it.
That cover's
the
identical,
eyes.
is it not?
These
Yeah.
2 characters essentially watch what we just watched.
Yes.
They
that's-
like literally play a movie.
That is the other thing that I was like I remember being blown away by at like 2:30 in the morning, whatever, that I'm like, they just showed something that I kind of can't believe
Right.
got
What the hell was
made
that?
it to television.
Right.
And then we watched a scene where other characters
You're like,
said,
huh.
watch.
That looks like Bob's face. Can you freeze on that?
And the giant is like, fuck, I'm supposed to recap this for AV Club. How do I fucking synopsize this?
Well, he synopsizes it by basically like kind of dreaming a golden cloud over his head. He sort of levitates and like a mist emerges from him. And that basically turns into Laura Palmer, a Laura Palmer globe. And it is like, it's some real Captain Planet shit. It's like, okay, like go fight Bob.
Yeah.
Right?
Which it's, it doesn't really it's hard for me to think about these things and try to unpack the logic of it, because it feels like in the fight of like good versus evil, it seems like an unfair fight, that it's like, we're going to create an innocent who's so good, but she's going to have to like be the victim of all of this terrible abuse. And like, that's the fight that they're arranging. Like, why not create a big bear that can fight Bob?
That would be cool if they created a big bear. Just
instead, it's like, how about we create this child and we'll have them be abused?
If you think about it that literally, it's very upsetting. And maybe we should have think
a big bear.
Maybe we should think about it that literally. Or maybe it's kind of like, right, we'll imbue one of his, victims with this, compelling power, or just, I don't know. I mean, how do you want to think about it? It's just like there will be light in counter to the darkness.
It's interesting because if you think back to what it felt like to watch the first episode of Twin Peaks, when Laura Palmer's body washes up on the shore and they're like, oh my God, Laura. And the people of the town are so upset by it. The idea that there'd be any character in the universe of this story that's like, it's all part of our plan. We're going to fight Bob this way. This is how we fight Bob.
Well, it's also like the image of her in the globe is literally her prom photo, right? The sort of iconic image of Twin Peaks is the and like when you think about the pilot where it's like, hey, Cheryl Lee, play this murder victim. You're going to get wrapped in plastic. You'll do that.
We'll take a prom photo.
We need to take a prom photo. And then we're going to do like 5 minutes of sort of video footage of you dancing around with Lara Flamboyant.
That's all we're hiring you to do. You have no dialogue.
You're a day player. You're a day player.
There's a world
Cheryl.
where they're like, okay, thanks. Like, that's all we need from you.
Not only you're a day player, but like most of your job is doing an accompanying photo shoot and basically being a piece of art design.
And then obviously
like production design.
Instead, the show, becomes like, immediately Lynch is like, this actor is so interesting and like we're going to use her all over the place. But for like the Twin Peaks The Return to be like, yes, Laura Palmer is the fucking Iron Man to Bob's Thanos. I mean, that's not what the show is doing, to be clear. But there is something just crazy about them shooting her face in a golden tube towards a like image of planet Earth.
Even if
it's kind of a big tuba.
Yeah, like it does feel very childlike.
Even if you think back to the giant at the beginning of season 2, imagine that there was a scene that they shot just so we have it. Gethard was standing as a little giant next to him, and a scene where the giant says, "I made Laura to fight Bob." And Cooper's just lying in bed like, what? What's going on?
But also, am I wrong in feeling like every single second of footage we have ever seen of Laura Palmer as a character is when she is already kind of like collapsing inside? Right? Like we never see dramatized. This is like a character who's like been like the receptacle for all of like the darkness of the world. And I feel like more than it being like, Laura, we're imbuing her with the power to fight Bob. There's something in the fact that when Laura dies, it feels like that was the last thing holding reality together. It's what makes everyone in the town spiral so fully out of control, right? Is like it goes beyond this sort of like, oh my God, whoever thought this could happen in a small town? The more conventional version of Twin Peaks, which is just a weird, inexplicable murder happens, and something that feels more spiritual and existential of like some barrier.
Yeah. I mean, episode 8 essentially finally pays off. We finally learned that Jean Reno was wrong when he attributed what went wrong to Agent Cooper. He come to town. Pretty girl die. Agent Cooper come to town. Suddenly, Twin Peaks is not so good a place. So like episode 8, finally, it's like we've tied up the Jean Reno plot line from season 2.
Thank God they
Turns out he was wrong. It wasn't Cooper's fault.
right. Instead, it was like a gramophone made Laura's face and shot it at a tube.
They probably did another take where it's like, let's not go with this one, but shoot it just so we have it. Of Jean Reno explaining, a giant to probably shoot her out of a tube. A pretty girl. Shoot her to
Do an
shoot her
old
to
timey wind up.
planet Earth. Senorita Dido maybe is
The
involved.
bomb.
I don't know.
The big bomb.
It's just a theory. Maybe not
If
true.
this episode has like 4 or 5 acts, right? So like 5 for Act 1. The prologue is Mr. C.
Mr. C.
And then we have the atom bomb.
Nine Inch
Sorry.
Nails.
Then we have 9 Inch Nails. Then we have the atom bomb sequence, and then we have what we just saw. This sort of the tube globes,
Yeah, we
and
do
then
the origin of Bob, the origin of Laura.
Right. and then the final 15 minutes. The sort of final act of it is like, okay, we're pulling out of total dream fantasy imagery. We're now in New Mexico in 1956 in the desert, and a strange creature has hatched from a little egg. And we're going to, it's still black and white. So we're still sort of in the aesthetic of this specific episode, but it's a girl and a boy, a teenage girl and a teenage boy, like talking to each other. And we're back to something a little more human.
I mean,
He's
this
telling
creature,
her how he got this beetle that gives him powers.
it's like
a suit of armor, but it's intelligent.
Heritage, all that stuff.
It's
Yes.
a
Both
frog
spiritual and
moth.
technology.
It's a frog moth.
See,
That's a great
I
call.
read it as a grasshopper
It looks like a big
because
bug.
it's got the long kind of body thing.
yeah, but it's large,
yeah,
quite large.
But it's,
And it has kind of
legs are
froggy
not-
back
yeah.
Well, no, I'm saying a grasshopper frog rather than a frog
Oh, I
moth,
see,
Oh,
I
sure.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fine.
right?
Yep.
And there is, I believe, in the Twin Peaks Access Guide book that came out back around season 2,
Okay.
there is a section that someone found when this episode came out that was like, is this what this thing was? And
Oh yeah, here it is.
Did you see it?
Yeah, that there's some sort of legend, like sort of Native American legend of a
Mythological creature.
mythological kind of frog creature.
Yeah, you're looking at the
Yeah.
same like Reddit post or
Yep,
whatever where they
yep,
have that
I am.
screenshot. Frog moths.
Yeah.
Well, Ben.
How the frog moth has
Here.
turned. Or maybe these images just rattle around in their heads and they use them in new ways.
Maybe this show is just so carefully plotted and tightly planned that we should not doubt them. They
Even
know what
knew
they're
it.
doing.
I knew
after
it all.
season 2, Lynch was like, I'm done with that shit.
This isn't some Vince Gilligan thing where we paint ourselves into a corner and then try
write
to
our way
figure out how to get Walt and Jesse out of it.
I don't need to explain the teddy bear.
Look at the episode titles.
There's, after this brief interlude with the boy and the girl, there's this sequence I would describe as a little spooky, where one of the woodsmen approaches a couple driving in a car
Let's also
and
say
asks if they've got a light.
it is unnerving to like cut to a couple quote unquote normal dialogue scenes between young people. You're just like, wait a second. I thought this wasn't going to go back to this kind of thing.
It's Robert Broski. He looks like zombie Abraham Lincoln. He's an actor who, to be clear, almost every single credit in his IMDb is Abraham Lincoln.
Really?
Like he is a well-known Abraham Lincoln impersonator.
I think he looks great.
Yeah, he looks cool.
What do we think just from a fashion standpoint?
Great.
Sooty,
Sooty.
flannel, good hat. I'm very like
Cigarette.
I think I should. Well, except for that part. Should I start being sooty?
Try it.
Your fiance might object to you treading soot through the halls.
But
That's
but
true.
Dirty
won't-
Ben
but-
2025?
you won't know that. You won't know that until you try it.
This is, you know
Yeah.
what? Connor
Yeah.
has a great attitude about this.
Mhm.
Try being sooty, and if it turns out to be a mistake, you can always course correct. Be less sooty or not sooty at all.
Robert Broski was in a 2014 short film called Lincoln, in which he played Abraham Lincoln, a clone of Abraham Lincoln. And he's got like Terminator eyes.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
It sounds good as hell.
I'm down to watch it.
Lincoln.
They clone Abe Lincoln's DNA and name the clone president for life, except there's one problem, the clone is evil. It's 5 minutes long. That's a lot of plot for 5
How
minutes.
many people are there in history?
Yeah, but
that
only
there's-
one problem though.
That's true. You can knock out one problem every 5 minutes.
that there's like no footage of.
We know how to solve the problem of a Lincoln if you think that Abraham Lincoln is a problem.
You have to clone
There's a-
Andrew.
No,
What?
we have been provided with a clear solution.
You
If
clone
think-
John Wilkes Booth.
If you think Abraham Lincoln is the problem, this is not a how do you solve a problem like Maria situation.
What is the solution, Connor?
You shoot him dead.
I think you have to clone John Wilkes Booth to shoot him dead, though.
Yeah, but the solution is still shooting him dead.
Sure.
If for some reason someone who's not a clone of John Wilkes Booth also shoots him dead, problem solved.
We don't know that, though. We don't have the data to prove that.
That's true. It's too small a sample size. We've only got one Lincoln.
Historically, only one guy has been able to kill Abraham
Thank
Lincoln
you
with
for
a
calling
bullet.
me out on my bad science.
You're welcome.
The sample size is far too small.
We don't know.
Now, I don't have the stomach to carry out this experiment because I like Lincolns and I don't think they're problems.
How many people are there that there isn't like film footage of that you could be like, hey, you know who you look like is Abraham Lincoln? Like you can pursue a career looking like Abraham.
That's a
Lincoln.
great question.
You know what I mean?
If you commit to the beard, it's probably a lot more than we think.
Yeah. Well, Santa Claus.
I mean, people that look like Jesus Christ.
That was the other one I was thinking of. But these are, you're right that those are more like kind of agreed upon advertising depictions of these figures. You know, there's like a constructed visual archetype versus Lincoln, where we're like, we got a handful of photos of him. We got the basics. And if you got the bone structure and the height, you're set for life.
Oh, yeah.
So got a light, kind of scary.
We never find out if they do.
Nope, they drive away. They're not into it.
Rude.
Yeah, I guess you never do find out if they got
If they have a light?
We're back to the boy and the girl. He kisses her. It's all very like
It kind of reminds
chaste.
it
and
kinda reminds me-
throwbacky, you know.
in the same way that a lot of Twin Peaks The Return, people have commented that it's not just a continuation of Twin Peaks, but in some ways it feels like it calls back to many things
Sure,
in Lynch's
absolutely.
career. I always feel like the scenes where they're walking and talking remind me of the scenes of Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern walking in Blue Velvet. That sort of innocent
Oh, sure.
conversation. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
she's got the kind
yeah.
of, she looks like in that, like Laura Dern looks like she's from another decade. She's dressed in this kind of like, you know, old fashioned way and all that.
It's also amazing that this episode, if it ended before this sequence, it would have been this crazy, weird episode with all this weird stuff. This part is the part that makes it a truly amazingly impressive episode because it's like we have how many minutes left? How long is this last section?
The last section's about 15 minutes long.
15
Yeah.
minutes, and it's like
Yes.
we're going to give you a fully self-contained narrative.
Sort of love horror story.
Introduce
It's
new
so
characters.
Weird. It's like,
Yeah.
we're going to give you this, right, this like budding, just hint of this budding teen romance and this like monster attack on the town, I guess is the best way to put
it's
it.
almost like Lynch. You could imagine if it ended before the segment, you could imagine some people, if they didn't like it, dismissing it as, well, this is a bunch of goofy garbage. It's a bunch of artsy, weird shit. He's lost it as a filmmaker. This isn't cinema. This is just a bunch of...
Well, what a lot of people said about him in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this last segment is just... It's not conventional filmmaking, but it is just like storytelling. I'm going to make a black and white horror movie. It's going to have... The pacing is perfect. It's creepy and hypnotic, but you get invested in the characters. It's really just it's one of the best 15 minutes of his whole career.
It is so cool and so scary. The woodsman like walks into the DJ, like into the radio booth, and it's perfect David Lynch violence where it's like the only effect initially is that he's putting his hand on the receptionist's head and pushing her down. And all she's doing clearly is kneeling down, right? Like there's nothing else happening. And then you cut to the second like close up of where the camera's shaking like crazy and buckets of blood are pouring over her head. And like, that's all you need is like these two very like, one is just nothing at all really. And the second is the most simple over the top kind of like violent effect without any, you know, real embellishment, just like lots of blood. It's not like we watch her head get crumpled. It's in your head that's happening.
There's also a modern technique that I can only think of a few examples of it, but like black and white with CGI digital special effects somehow looks so impressive because I don't know if it's that my brain
Yes.
processes black and white as like, how did they do these? Like it processes black and white as old. And so when I see something that's CGI in color, I see it as like, oh, it's a computer effect. It's impressive, but I'm processing it as a computer effect sometimes.
I've said this many times. I think the trend of like, actually, I always wanted to film it in black and white, so I'm doing a black and white cut for the Blu-ray is largely kind of bullshit nonsense. The one I find entrancing is Fury Road for that reason. Because that movie is constructed more like a silent film and is so CGI heavy, but a weird combination of CGI and practical. When you're watching these long wordless stretches in black and white, it feels like, how did they make this in 1910?
It's also like The Mist is kind of like that, where you have these CGI bugs that look like perfectly professional CGI special effects, but in black and white, you're like, how on earth did 1940s filmmaker Frank Darabont make?
Well, yes, it makes The Mist feel like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
I do think the Godzilla like -1 - color thing, while interesting, doesn't really work because you're just like, I know what a Godzilla movie looked like in black and white. It was a guy in rubber.
The woodsman kills the people in the radio station, and then he says, this is the water, this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within. He says it a lot, just in case you didn't get it. I do feel like, again, not to overanalyze, because I really think you can do whatever you want, but the horse is the white of the eyes, right? The white of the eyes don't see. The horse is this image that's in all of Twin Peaks. Sarah is always seeing the horse. And to me, it symbolizes very plainly, like it's like just looking, not seeing what is happening. And that's what's like the Laura, that's the story of Laura. It's like everyone's just kind of looking away or looking around what's happening to her. And that's what the horse means.
But why is it making everyone fall asleep? Like, why is it so hypnotic?
Because they need young Sarah Palmer to fall asleep so that the frog moth can climb into her body. So basically they have to do a chemical attack on the whole town to put everybody to sleep. Or not a chemical attack, but a hypnotic attack on the
This
town.
is really just a lullaby being broadcast over the radio waves.
Yeah.
Right.
And they get the job done, which is that they put this frog moth into young Sarah Palmer.
They imbue her with whatever sort of second sight or connection to this other world.
And the woodsman is kind of in on it, but he's not playing a side, right? Yeah.
I feel like he's on the. I feel like this benefits Bob.
Well, isn't though the creature eventually going to lead to Bob's demise?
No, I think Sarah is sort of. I mean, I struggle with all this. But
yes, because Sarah is gonna give birth to Laura Palmer,
which sets up all of these.
Oh, you're right. So maybe the woodsmen are neutral. Well, let's just make this a fair fight.
That's what I'm kind of saying. Yeah.
Maybe I just like
they're like the referees.
It's tough to think about sides because it's right. This is not like
the woodsmen are basically like, this is a jump ball. I don't play favorites.
What's your read on it, David?
My read on it is what I said. Like is the white of the eyes thing or whatever. Like, and is that Sarah is touched with this like awful darkness, and that's her character in Twin Peaks. Liz Grace Zabrisky's right. It's like she's not well. She's not able to help her daughter. She is aware of things like she has visions. And so she has that connection to, and of course we'll see her more in Twin Peaks: The Return. And Grace Zabriskie is having a lot of fun. You'll see. But like, she's not really an ally to Laura.
Right.
In any particular way.
I mean, in a certain way, she has a superpower to not clock what's going on. Like even just the conjuring of the images of the horse and whatever, it's like there are like complicated systems in place to keep her sort of distracted in a way. That's how a lot of people cope with trauma, how they get through.
Exactly. I think it's right. If you just want to take the metaphor again, right, it's like Sarah represents, the sin of omission or whatever, like just like looking away and not but it's also stopping the evil happening under her roof.
But in a certain way, it's a basic human survival impulse. Right? It's not like, oh, she's like failing in her duty through some like shitty parenting in her core. It's like it's hard to fucking look the horse in the eye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And
the human brain wants to reject it.
The character we meet in Twin Peaks is a sort of, a really sad kind of rotted out character, like by the time we're meeting her. Like, and then in Twin Peaks: The Return, have we seen her yet? Maybe not, but we will see her.
Sarah Palmer?
Did we saw her briefly?
We've seen her watching animals like eating each other on TV, and we see her house is very depressing.
Her house is very frightening, but we'll see her later.
We'll see her
more. And I feel like it's only gotten sort of worse with her at this point.
Counter theory, it could be that the frog moths and the woodsman are not connected. It's just a coincidence of timing. And the woodsman story could be as simple as that one of them wants to be on the radio.
Yeah, he just really wants to debut his poetry.
He tries it out, and he learns very quickly that he doesn't get along with the staff at the radio station. Like, it's just not a good fit.
This is kind of his Airheads moment.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, this is where it ties in, because you literally see on air. So I'm like, oh, this is a callback to On the Air, the Lynch Frost sitcom.
Sure, yeah.
Which we're gonna cover in the episodes we will not release even on the Patreon, right? Just totally. The secret episodes just for us.
5th tier, yeah.
That we pay into, just the 4 of us.
It's sort of a blind trust.
Yeah. But on the air, he wants to be on the radio. He tries it out. He finds out, the people of this town, they find him boring as heck.
And he got a really bad market share. That's the other thing. There's the scene that they cut out where the guy comes in and he's like, look, I got to just rip the Band-Aid off. The ratings were not good.
And then he just, he walks out of the station and leaves dead air. There's no record playing and dead people. But the dead people would have been no problem if the ratings had been there.
If the sponsors supported the show, the dead people we could have jumped over that.
It is creepy to think, though, of tuning into your local radio station and
this is the water
and hearing that, but even just hearing nothing.
Sure, that is creepy. Yeah, that's a creepy thought.
Because
you're right.
Radio, I mean, even
on.
in those days, it had some kind of programming.
It was so exciting when he started delivering that poem on the air. We're calling it a poem, right? I'm calling it a poem.
Sure,
slam.
Absolutely.
It's a slam.
Poetry. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to go read my poem on the radio. Okay? You guys want to hang around other parts of town while I wait for me?
If the zoo crew wants to stand by, I'll let them know when the interjections are allowed.
I'm going to do my water well poem on the radio.
Now, Mark Frost says the idea for this episode, and he says it very plainly, is like we'd never done anything close to what you would call an origin story for Twin Peaks, showing where this pervasive sense of darkness and evil had come from. And so we just sort of wrote down a 15-page script, he said, eventually. And he knew as they wrote it, like the atomic bomb on the page is like half a page. And he's like, I know that's 15 minutes. Like David will then just take that and do whatever he wants with it. And he said, we wanted something that would stand apart and blow your mind. It's like, it's as simple as that.
Because half of this episode has no dialogue at all.
Yeah, more than half, probably. And even the stuff that quote unquote has dialogue, it's pretty spare.
It's just
dialogue.
like 5 pages of This Is the Water and This Is the Well. I was so excited when it got to the This Is the Water and This Is the Well part, particularly because it felt like Twin Peaks, but it also was not like anything that had ever been on Twin Peaks before. Like that whole sequence is like, yes, this is like, it's not a callback. It's not like when you are in the Black Lodge again, like we've seen that. This is a completely new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I could imagine a world in which a sequence like this, if let's imagine a world in which Twin Peaks runs for 8 seasons on ABC. It's very easy to imagine there'd be a point where there'd be a sequence where a woodsman walks into the modern day 90s Twin Peaks radio station. Then you cut to a sequence of Big Ed and the principal and all these people falling asleep. At this point, it would have been like 3 months after the death of Laura Palmer, or 6 months, I guess, with every episode being a day. But it felt so exciting to see something like that after an episode with so many different strange things that had no precedent in any previous form of Twin Peaks, to get this little horror movie at the end, and then to feel like, oh, and maybe this is Sarah Palmer. but it just says young girl. But I'm like, it lines up time-wise.
Timing-wise, exactly.
So it's like, it could be her, but it also could be that we don't know what this is about yet, you know?
Yeah. I just think you can really do whatever you want with it. Like, I really support that. And if someone wants to send me a sort of wild out there take, I'd be intrigued, you know, but I do think Mark Frost, and he talks about Twin Peaks all the time. And then David Lynch, whenever you get him to talk about it, would probably, be upfront of like, no, but we kind of just wanted to do this kind of flashback origin thing. That's what we were going for. They wouldn't be like, it means what it means. Like, I don't know, you guys figure it out. They're like, no. We sat down and we're like, what's the origin of the evil here?
Specificity.
Right.
So on the one hand, it's the most baffling, inexplicable, artsy, abstract episode. And in another sense, it's like
the most straightforward.
Yeah, it's like it actually would be harder to synopsize some of the other episodes that look like conventional storytelling, but it's like Dougie Jones works for this office in Las Vegas, and you're like, wait, how is this? And you're like, well, no, because Dougie Jones is the body that is a tulpa that Mr. C created. You know, you're just like, that stuff is so much harder to summarize than
when they created nuclear weapons that generated unspeakable evil.
And then
like the sort of simplest idea.
And then there's like someplace that's kind of like heaven or something where positive forces created some light to balance it. And then we go back and see Laura Palmer's mom as a little girl and how she got like infected by this monster at an early age.
So there you go, Griff. Are you completely caught up?
Thank you for a perfect answer.
No, I'm serious, truly serious. Like,
yeah,
I
Griffin,
feel like you can watch it again.
I'm being serious.
I'm
I'm
trying to goof around.
not goofing.
Like
I'm deadly serious.
This is not Riff Tracks.
You know what it is, though.
You could watch
Griff
it again.
Tracks.
It is Griff Tracks. And just, not the first time you watch the episode, you're just sort of bewildered because it doesn't sequentially follow what happens. And you're just sort of like, what's this now? What's this now? What's this now? But then the more times you watch it, I've watched this episode several times because it's fun to watch standalone.
I also had to keep starting and stopping the episode the first time I watched it because, not because I fell asleep because I was sleepy or bored.
Right.
But because I kept getting sort of like hypnotized by it. And then I'd be like, I have to back up.
Yeah.
I have to back up because I'm not sure what I just saw.
Well, so you had been up all night the night before doing Big Sloppy Naturals. Of course, was an improv show
set where
run
people
on Whippets.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Murph Meyer, our good friend Murph Meyer.
Oh, woo!
That's kind of his part 8, right? Was David, Big Sloppy Naturals. That was his ultimate.
David, don't say seriously when we're in the middle. We've just established, we worked so hard to establish how serious we were being.
We're trying to be serious here. Don't question the seriousness.
We are being very serious.
It's so confusing to me. It's more confusing than episode 8 for us to convey to Griff that we're being serious here.
Let's say seriously with a period.
And then say seriously.
And not throw around our question marks willy-nilly.
Willy Wonka.
Let's not Willy Wonka our question marks. Let's not make them edible.
Oh, of course. No, you don't want to do that.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I want to call it. We're going to find out that Willy Wonka's middle name is Nilly in Wonka 2. Because Nilly rhymes with a lot of stuff. Silly, Billy.
But that...
Willy.
Right.
But won't he?
But you want to put your chips down on Nilly being the middle name. As you just said, there are a lot of other things it could be.
We're going to learn a lot of things. We're going to figure out, does he learn to read?
Are there other animals he can milk?
Yeah.
I have nipples, Greg. Can you milk me?
Can you milk me?
Right. Does he milk Robert De Niro?
Does he meet the Fockers?
And Wonka 2 willy-nilly.
Would it be funny if...
I hope Wonka meets the Fockers.
There's the atom bomb and then the Fockers come out of the atom bomb. Just all the Fockers.
my prediction is we'll find out his middle name is Nilly. That you can take that to the bank.
Sure.
But my hope is my wish is that he meets those Fockers.
Do you hope he
meet those Fockers?
Do you hope he meets the little Fockers? Because he's good with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, some little Fockers. I don't mind that. And I hope,
Wonka's good with kids.
Wonka's good with kids.
Most characters in this show are not good with kids.
In Twin Peaks The Return?
Yeah.
Also, most characters in the Fockers universe are not good with kids.
No, they're sort of ill-equipped with pretty much everyone.
Wait, are you referring to Little Nicky when you say people aren't good with kids?
Okay, let's get all of our threads cleanly established here. Wonka 2, willy-nilly. We predict he will meet the Fockers, the little Fockers, and Little Nicky. That's what we're predicting? Okay.
Good prediction. The ratings game.
Oh, sure. So this is the point in the podcast where we usually do the box office game. We are covering TV. Now, our friends at Regal, of course, the folks behind Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits, are continuing to sponsor the ratings game, even though this is a TV show. Now, some people say the Twin Peaks: The Return is like an 18-hour movie. And with Regal Unlimited, you can see 18 hours worth of movies a month if you're smart, if you use it well. And right now, for the holidays, if you use code BLANKCHECK at checkout for your Regal Unlimited subscription, you can get 20% off. That's double the previous offer. This is unprecedented. Anyway, now we're going to try to guess television ratings.
I'm going to give you the cable ratings.
Okay.
For June 25th, 2017.
So you're not going to compare it to network broadcast?
The network ratings are so irrelevant because I guess it's sort of after the TV season is ended. So
Cable's a more fun game.
4 game shows and 1 America's Funniest Home Videos.
Is AFV still in?
AFV number 1.
Number 1.
But AFV was beating seasons 1 and 2 of Twin Peaks. It's crazy to be like AFV is still beating The Return.
So crazy.
Yeah, if you were to put me in a coma for all that time and not tell me that it was season 3, I'd be like, wow, all these shows lasted the whole time.
Okay,
So
summer
the
2017
most,
cable.
yes, the most watched cable show that Sunday night got 3.8 million viewers, solid 1.5 in the demo. It's a special event on a cable channel.
It's a special event.
An awards show, one might say.
Okay, in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, not one of our better known awards shows, but an awards show.
The ESPYs?
No.
Am I close?
You're close in that it's an award show named for a network.
Is it the BET Awards?
The BET Awards.
Well, look at that. What were you going to guess, Connor?
MTV something.
Right. Yes, the
Spike
BET Awards.
TV.
The MTV
Hosted
something.
by Leslie Jones.
Okay.
Spike TV, the
Beyonce.
Stimpies.
Beyonce won 5 awards.
The Gary the Rats.
Album of the Year, Video of the Year,
The Booberellas.
so on and so forth.
Stripperella.
Like Chance the Rapper was Best New Artist. That's how much time has passed.
This is what's crazy.
Like, it's like now I'm like, Chance the Rapper, that guy is cooked, cooked as hell. Right?
So
Wait, is this?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about what's happened with Chance the
Nothing,
Rapper.
I'm just saying, like, he's not like cool anymore or
He's
what,
not cool.
it's like
Hold on. Hold on. I'm catching up here. Let me just get my notebook out. Not
Best.
cool.
It looks like
hold on. Any more?
he had this like incredibly exciting shot out of a cannon, like prodigious career. And then he was like, I'm ready to make my first proper album. And it was quietly one of the greatest boondoggles of modern music. Is that fair to say?
I'm not a huge expert, but I do know that, right.
Hold on, let me
The
just
big day.
he made a
Boondoggle.
concept album about a wedding going wrong.
Boondoggle.
And it got kind of bad reviews. And
Yes.
there was some controversy about him maybe leaning on websites to like, hey, don't write bad reviews about me because then I won't like do interviews. I don't know. Like there was a lot of that going
And then A24 dumped his movie. It just felt like he had a couple projects in a row where people had no enthusiasm for what he was doing after there being so much enthusiasm
Hold
out of the
on,
gate.
because I want to just have enough information that in polite society I can look like I really know what I'm talking about. So Chance the Rapper, everyone thought he won awards for Best New Rapper, and then within a few years he made an album about a wedding gone wrong. It was one of the great boondoggles. And he started leaning on websites saying, hey, don't write bad reviews about me.
Look, first of all, amazing recall. I feel like that was almost verbatim.
If I say that in a conversation, people will be like, wow, this guy knows a lot about Chance the Rapper.
Connor gets it.
Best movie that year at the BET Awards was Hidden Figures.
Oh, sure.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is a spin-off of one of the big cable hits.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
It's a spinoff
It's a
of one
Sunday night show.
Is it Fear the Walking Dead?
Fear
The
Fear.
Walking Dead.
Because people watch The Walking Dead and they would watch the show and zombies are eating people and they'd
Yeah.
be like, but should I be afraid of these guys?
Right,
And
they'd be
Amy's just like,
laughing.
I'm more scared
you
of
guys
laughing.
didn't
I'm
fucking
watching The Walking Dead. I'm more scared of Negan and his baseball bat.
Well, that's
Well,
true.
you know what?
Sometimes humanity is the biggest nightmare of all.
Wait a second. You
This
think
is a
that's
show
true?
that
That's
asks
always
you-
been my secret take. Are the real monsters the living?
Number
You
3.
should be scared of the zombies is the title of that show.
Number 3. That's what they do. At the box
AMC's You Should Be Scared of the Zombies.
is
Course correction.
is number 3 at the box office. I mean the ratings, cable
Office.
ratings.
Cable ratings office.
Yes, is a long running comedy drama series, fantasy comedy drama that was a spin-off of a hit TV film
I'm sorry. Wait a second.
There was like a hit TV movie.
Is it The Librarians?
No, but you're kind of
Okay,
in the
there was a
right.
hit TV movie.
Yeah, I think
which
there were
then-
several.
Which then turned into a comedy fantasy drama. What were the terms you used to describe?
it's a fantasy comedy drama is the genre. Basically, there was a bunch of TV movies.
so there were a bunch of TV.
I think there was
okay,
and
a
then
whole
it,
bunch of
It was a TV
movies.
movie franchise, and then they
ran for
serialized
7 seasons as a
proper series.
series. I think interspersed with even more movies. It's kind of one of the big sort of shows for this network.
Is it like The Descendants?
No,
But is it
but that's
is it a young
fine
person's
call.
thing
no,
like that?
I don't.
It's not
think
like Pretty
so.
Little Liars.
person's
No,
thing.
what is it? The fuck?
Um,
There were a series of
Critically revered?
I'll tell you no, I don't think so.
No.
I'll tell you the network. It's the Hallmark channel.
Oh, Christmas in the Marriage Town.
Great call that they should do something called Christmas in the Marriage Town.
Connor, you've just sold a
Did
film.
I just make $1 million?
You just made $1 million. There was a series of
You
movies.
can't live here. You're single, and it's almost Christmas.
And they turned into a series, and the series ran for 6 or 7 seasons
Yeah.
on the Hallmark
On the
channel.
Hallmark Channel.
As
Yeah.
a fantasy.
Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Clifford the Big Red
It stars
Christmas Diary.
Catherine Bell, who of course in the 90s was the
Jag.
star of Jag.
SNL liked to make jokes about her bosom. Talked about that in a recent episode for a reason I don't remember.
Jag has come up a lot.
It's
it
her
feels like.
Catherine
Jag.
Bell.
Bell.
It came up because I
As
think we were
in
talking NCIS
Doesn't ring a.
But why? Oh, in the ratings
in the
game?
ratings game.
Oh, look, it all comes back together.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
just going to tell you.
I'm out.
It's called Good Witch.
Good Witch?
Genuinely?
Good Witch.
Genuinely? News to me.
News to you. Well,
This
it
was
was
a-
number 3.
Fucking multimedia franchise?
It had 2.3 million viewers that night, my friend. More than Twin Peaks: The Return episode 8, which is supposedly the apex of TV storytelling or whatever.
2.3 million. Well, Twin Peaks episode 8 is no Good Witch. Ratings wise.
Exactly. Number 4 and 5 are both shows on the esteemed network HGTV, which I think Ben occasionally
Yeah, I was going to say,
will
Ben might be able to guess this
dip
better than the
into.
rest of us.
I watch it because it's just junk food. It's not good for you, but I just find it deeply comforting.
Ben, if you had to guess who was the top of the HGTV pile in 2017,
I don't know.
You'll
There's
never
so
ever
many
guess.
shows.
You'll never guess.
There's
This show
literally
is so
many shows.
like whatever that it doesn't have a Wikipedia page. Like, because HGTV just punts out this stuff. But
I'm
it's
going
a
to guess
show-
it's called Making Houses.
Is it a
great
flipper
guess.
show?
No, it's a show about people looking for things on the beach.
Oh.
Property, one might say.
Sand
Beach.
grabbers.
No, beachfront.
No,
Is it like metal detectors?
no, I don't. I think. Look, the title makes it sound like it's metal detectors, but I think it's actually just looking for
Like treasure finders?
But I think it's just property
Dr.
on the
Beach and the Sand Squad.
There you go. It's called Beach Hunters.
I was so close.
You were very close.
Sand
Well,
grabbers?
it's like house hunters, but it's an extension of that.
It's
beach
people-
hunters. It's people looking for beach
People
houses.
getting beach houses.
Sand marriage and Christmas desert?
That's right.
Yeah.
And then
That's
number
what the Hallmark
I'm sorry,
version would be.
What?
I'm trying,
Number
I'm trying to
5.
get the $1 million that Connor just got. I need to start pitching my own Hallmark
Number-
Christmas
num-
marriage movies.
Number 5 is another HGTV show.
See how quickly he made $1 million? The check's
set-
already arrived.
I invested it. It's making money just sitting there in my account.
Crypto.
He's
He's
putting
got
the money
crypto
to
piling
work.
up.
You need money to make money.
That's so true. You do need money to make money.
I make my money
losing
make
money.
money. I make my money make money.
It's this show. This show, Griffin, is set in Mexico. It's another HGTV show about looking for properties in Mexico.
Okay. Hola, Feliz Navidad wedding.
You guys are just doing so much more work
La
than the
Casa.
bums at HGTV.
La Casa.
La
you
Casa
guys are like
Grande.
trying to
La
think of something,
Casita.
and they're
The
just like,
Little
no,
House.
it's just gonna be called Mexico Life.
It's called Mexico Life?
That sounds like a spicy cereal.
I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that it does. Right? It's like, is life cereal a little too
It's
uncomplicated for you?
tahini flavored life.
Yeah,
So-
it's like the hot ones version of life.
Some of the
cereal.
other shows you've got in the top 10 here, you've also got an HGTV
How far
show.
out of the top 10 do we have to
I
go
have
to
no
get
idea.
to
It's
Twin
not,
Peaks?
It's not in the top 15.
Is it in the top 100?
I don't know. I only have 15.
Oh my God.
You also have something called Lakefront Bargain Hunt. How different is that from beach life? I guess it's lakes, not
It's lakes.
oceans.
Yeah. No,
I
so
like-
it's really different.
Okay, you're right.
It's one of the few shows. It's the only show so far that the title fucking rhymes.
That's true.
That's true. You've
That's true.
got
You got to give him credit for that.
you got
Connor seems very upset.
AMC's
I've been sitting through all this like Bjork level non-rhyming title. Shit.
Bjork level.
Finally, Lakefront House Hunt. What's it called?
Lakefront Bargain Hunt. Yeah.
Lakefront
Bargain Hunt.
Right.
You've got AMC's Preacher, which was,
Yeah.
kind of a thing back then. Yeah.
For a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got Stars' Power, which I feel like Power is always, there's always more power.
I mean, we're on like the 8th book of Power.
Yeah, they keep opening new books to that sucker. You have a Food Network show called Food Star, and you have the, I would say, fairly well known reality show 90 Day Fiancé. Is that about people who get married within 90 days? Or they're married for 90 days? Oh, I see. It's long distance couples have 90 days to decide whether or not to get married. Okay. And then finally you have, and I think it's really important to note, an ESPN broadcast of a game between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, we just have to say that ate Twin Peaks episode 8's lunch.
And yet, doesn't even have the dignity to rhyme.
So how many people watched Twin Peaks episode 8?
Wikipedia is saying around 250,000.
I think that was basically what the ratings were for Twin Peaks: The Return generally. About 250,000 of live viewers.
We discussed this, that when the Deadline wrote about the premiere, the first episode of The Return, they were like, this is embarrassing. Not a lot of views for this highly anticipated legacy, revival series. And Showtime was like, we feel good about this. And the ratings were basically always that linear.
Yeah,
but they got a lot of fucking Showtime sign-ups. And then they'd be like +7 days with VOD and DVR.
I'm still signed up to Showtime.
This is the thing. They were basically like, I think it was kind of like the Sirius XM Howard Stern move, where they were like, this just gets people over to our channel who will sign up for anything if it's Twin Peaks.
I also think it's probably an example of the kind of long-term thinking that not enough of these companies do, which is like, we build a library, we build a brand, we build a legacy, we build stuff, and and it means something.
And then like Showtime and CBS and Paramount all remerged, and now all of Twin Peaks is on Paramount Plus, and that's the thing they get to put in the mountaintop. Laura Palmer's trekking up there with Cartman and Picard.
I mean, you gotta get the Criterion app. You want to watch the Firewalk with Me and Missing Pieces, though.
Well, but that's in the box. I got it in the box right there.
I know, but I'm just talking. You want to stream it? You gotta get 2 streams.
Okay,
you gotta get the Paramount stream. Gotta get Criterion stream.
Okay.
So I'm going to say that we're done discussing Twin Peaks: The Return.
Wow,
wait, how? What are we?
We're done. We're not covering the last 10 episodes at all.
Oh yeah, we're done. We're actually, yeah. You know what? Check in with the other ones. Some stuff happens.
People are gonna hate.
No,
this.
I'm saying we're done discussing Twin Peaks: The Return, episode 8.
Is this episode of Blank Check ending?
Soon.
All right. Was there anything else we want to talk about?
Well, Connor, is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything else
sort of bring in
as your one appearance within Twin Peaks: The Return, without spoiling anything for Ben or I that we haven't seen yet,
or listeners?
Well, yes, of course.
I definitely had a feeling of. I mean, I love Twin Peaks: The Return overall. I'm not going to spoil anything past 8, but with all kind of revisiting of an old thing where you could ruin it, you could like botch it in a way that you get a negative feeling, and it sort of retroactively there's always like the risk that it'll taint what came before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for what will make it well, this will be worth it. If we only got this out of it, then it'll be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit how I feel about some of the Netflix Arrested Development era, which is there are aspects of it that I'm like, well, if we only got that part of it, I'm glad just for this part or that part. And there'd be stuff like Wally Brando, like moments like that where I'm like, even if it was just this scene,
Right.
It's worth
even
it,
if the
yeah.
rest of it was terrible,
Mhm.
I'd want it to happen just so we have Wally Brando. Episode 8, I liked everything of 1 through 7, but episode 8 was the thing where it's like, if it ended now, I would be like, I'm so glad they came back, even though there wouldn't have been closure on anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely feel like I have no sense of what is going to happen in the rest of the season. To a certain extent, I'm like, everything I feel like I absorbed about this show through cultural osmosis, and I've not been digging around reading fucking summaries and whatever, but just like 7-8 years of being online and out in the world and whatever.
Oh, you're there. I guarantee
I feel like
you,
most of it's been crossed off the list of what I knew going in.
I guarantee you that almost all of the parts that are my favorite of the remaining part, I don't think you will have been spoiled for by memeing or anything like that.
I'm just surprised by how much of it has already happened of like, oh, the Amanda Seyfried shot, and Wally Brando in episode 8, and Dougie with the tie on the head.
I know there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, which I talked about a little bit with Griffin when we were on a boat ride last weekend.
We took a nice boat ride.
We took a nice little boat ride.
To be clear, we took a ferry to New Jersey.
Yeah. I've been working on a thing lately, which is I've watched The Return all the way through start to finish twice. And it's not the kind of thing there's a lot of parts of it I'll revisit, a lot of favorite scenes or moments in episode, but there's also scenes that I will fast forward through because I don't need to see them again. But one of the things that was most shocking to me when I saw it, because I said before it started, I had my dream of digital animated bobs flying through space and flying out of stomachs.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I was really positive of is that, well, the fact that Angelo Badalamenti is back means that no matter what, we're going to get wall-to-wall Angelo Badalamenti Twin Peaks music. And he made even the lowest points of season 2 feel like Twin Peaks and feel watchable because his music was always there to say, even a scene that wasn't funny would have that kind of like
jazzy mood.
And you'd kind of feel like, yeah, it's kind of funny. Like what's going on. Even if the scenes weren't good, you'd be like, it's as good as any funny scene because it has this funny jazz, whatever. There's so little of the Badalamenti music in this show compared to the first 2 seasons of the movies. And I say 2 movies there because there's 2 feature films, Firewalk with Me and The Missing Pieces.
Weird. David is crying
one of them
tears like Lashifra.
One of them was theatrically released. The other one's a streamer. That's okay. You can count a streamer as a real movie now.
David has smoke coming out of his ears.
Yeah. And then I was shocked. Really, in the first 2 episodes, the thing that was the most shocking was how many scenes play out to total silence.
That's an interesting point. I'm going to think about it more too, because like there is lots of beautiful music that he made that you can listen to. The soundtracks out there and all that.
I have started because there's a thing called the Twin Peaks archive that they released at one point that's like hundreds of cues that didn't make it onto the soundtrack albums.
All the raw material that Badalamenti.
Everything that they were working with, basically, including the Twin Peaks archive is so full that it even includes music that was written for On the Air.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's tracks at the end. They're like, oh, this is for On the Air.
But also just like him coughing on microphone.
Yeah.
He's accidentally laved up and he takes a leak and they forgot to turn off.
And it's
the recording.
Beautiful music, Angelo. I have started scoring Twin Peaks: The Return using these tracks. And
I don't know if you know this, David, but Connor has a touch of the Topher to him.
You're messing with
the man's been known to make.
You're ripping out the guts. You're tinkering.
Yeah.
I got a touch of the Topher.
He's got a touch of the Topher. He's been known to make a cut or two.
I consider it, it's a feeling of grace, to be honest,
there is a certain grace to having a touch of the Topher.
And I have to say, it's really interesting because there's so many things where there's scenes that are so long that you actually can't score them without it feeling like, no, this is too much. So those, I'm being like discreet about it, but there are a lot of scenes where if you add a little bit of discreet jazz in some of the comedic scenes, like for instance, the very first scene with Jacoby where the shovels arrive, putting a little bit of the
just
putting some of that under. It's amazing how it takes I think 4-minute scene and makes it feel like it's not 4 minutes of a truck arriving in a box. Like there's just like it makes it feel like it's Twin Peaks when Jacoby comes out of his like a motorhome or whatever he steps out of. And episode 8, I'm up to episode 8 and scoring these things. And episode 8 by far needed the fewest music cues. I think I had a little bit of scoring to the Mr. C stuff at the beginning, but then almost nothing because it's sort of like, and I know that there's the thing, Griffin pointed out that there's the moment where they bring in the Laura
This is my
Palmer.
counter. The scene where Bobby sees Laura's photo in whichever episode, is 5 or 6? Sort of out of the evidence box.
Right.
And Laura's theme
And the
hits
old
for the
music
first
comes,
time.
right.
Is such a kind of hammer blow because they've been holding that music back for most of the series.
And I did not use the Laura. I haven't used that Laura Palmer theme, but I have used the first part of that theme, which is used a lot for its own. The part that's the synthesizers going, that sort of back and forth. Because like a lot of the Matthew Lillard stuff, you add a little bit of that to it, sort of like the Packard Mills sort of like music to it, and it really makes it really amps up some of the. It just makes it feel like Twin Peaks in a way that is exciting to me.
I'd be interested to see it. Like, truly, listen.
Do you ever share these cuts with anybody?
Yeah,
I feel like
exactly.
you've described a lot of cut editing projects to me.
I think when I'm done with this, I'll probably have it sit in a Dropbox folder, and I'll give people the link to this Dropbox folder if they want to experience it. Because it is like, if you've already watched it all the way through and experienced it as Lynch intended, because it definitely was a choice. He had access to all these tracks too, and he wanted to do this. I do think it is an interesting thing just to see, like, can you make it feel even more like Twin Peaks with this music? And my answer so far is like, it is a very good feeling. It would be like if they made Star Wars movies without John Williams music all of a sudden, and it was just sort of like quiet space battles. And you're like, well, they're really trying to make a point here that you can't hear this music in space.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as
Right.
before.
The vacuum of sound cut.
Then you show them and you add some John Williams music to it. Probably is like, it feels like Star Wars.
Yeah, right. I think what you're doing is probably a perversity of whatever.
A perversity, yes.
Of what Lynch was attempting with The Return, but I'd still be interested to see it.
I agree. What I'm doing is a perversity.
Right. Lynch wouldn't like that you did that.
You want to hear about an ultimate perversity of director's intent. Connor, tell David about your fucking alternate cut of Sully.
Oh,
What'd you do to Sully?
just crashes.
It's even worse than what Michael Malley
it's
did.
the crash cut. I got it on my phone. I cut out all the parts that weren't the crash. So it's just crash, crash,
I got
crash,
it on
crash,
my
crash.
phone.
It's a tight 40-minute feature.
Sure.
It's still, go by the Saludos Amigos rules, it's still a feature film.
But I would say
I'm invoking the Saludos Amigos
The
doctrine.
power of Saludos, the precedent set.
By the precedent set by Saludos Amigos, it is still a feature film. But, the thing is, I started cutting it. I'm like, I like the crash parts more than I like the parts where he's like, I include the dream crash. So it's 41 minutes, 21 seconds. It's tight.
You know what it sounds like to me? You railroaded Sully.
yeah, I would say you're not really delving into the beautiful kind of storytelling of that movie.
Sounds like a railroading.
We're withholding the full crash for a long time because it's about Sully sitting in the trauma of what happening to him and not really
you see the
facing
crash,
it.
then you
It's a
see the
fractured
crash, then you
memory.
see the crash, then you see the crash.
This sounds
And
like
then-
Sully's nightmare.
No, but then it has a great cut at the end because it cuts to the part where they land the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then Aaron
In the
Eckhart,
simulator or the real one?
the real one.
Okay.
Aaron Eckhart looks to camera. He's looking at Sully. Camera moves to Aaron Eckhart's point of view. Sully looks to him. Hard cut to black. And then we hear Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers learning to fly.
Well, I won't be watching that one, but I'd
Well,
love to see.
I'm going to share the link with you. So we'll just see if you don't watch it.
Okay, fair enough. You know
Connor,
what? Share
thank
the
you
link
for
with
doing
me.
this again.
Thank
Yes.
you for having me on the main feed.
Yeah.
So glad to return on main.
Yeah. And we'll have you back on in another 9 years.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We'll
I'll
get you on
see you again
in
in
9.
9 years.
Tiny Dinos,
Tiny Dinos.
your podcast with James III.
My podcast
Another blank check favorite.
about two best friends who are scientists who bring back dinosaurs, but they bring them back very small, so
Very
they won't
tiny.
cause any problems, like in Jurassic Park.
We got some George Lucas talk shows coming up in California and San Francisco and Los Angeles in
Fine.
January, February.
Find out about them. My Connor Ratliff presents the acting class. It's going to be. It keeps performing monthly in New York, but we're also going to bring it to Sketchfest. Where
And you're doing live streams of those too for
Yeah,
people
you can-
who don't
you-
live in New York.
if you don't live in
watch
New
those.
York, you can see those. That's my one-person show where I pretend to teach an acting class.
It's fantastic.
And Griffin, you're going to be a part of that at Sketchfest, so that's going to be You don't know about this?
No, I said I am,
yeah.
period. I'm not throwing around willy-nilly question marks.
I
Like,
didn't know.
seriously?
I didn't. Seriously? I'm being serious right now.
Can we get serious?
Satellite radio.
Yeah. What? The bits are stacking on top
All
of each
right,
other.
that's enough.
That's enough. And I think that's all my plugs.
Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Tune in next week for Twin Peaks: The Return: parts 9 through 14. Is that correct?
9 through 13.
Well, the egg on my face. I'm a fool.
Yeah, but those 5 episodes.
And as always, on August 13th, 1998, MTV aired an episode of television titled The Missing Girl, in which Fight 1 was Trent Reznor versus Puff Daddy. Fight 2 was David Hasselhoff versus John Tesh.
Why?
Because, I don't know, they're corny music guys.
I guess.
They're guys who have
I hope
Moonlight.
Tesh won.
Hasselhoff won.
Yeah.
Puff Daddy versus Trent Reznor was a draw. They slice each other to bits, and then Mills Lane put them together as 2 composite creatures. And then the final fight was Bruce Willis and Demi Moore versus Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
I remember that one. This is a power couple fight.
And what happens is the women win.
Thank God.
Stone Cold gives them the assist.
To feminism.
They knock down those men. And that episode, the most seismic episode of television I had seen up until that point in time, was episode 8.
Wow. What a world.